Chapter 253. Yin sized up Qi Yu and said indifferently, Xian Yuan, what does Panga's emergence have to do with me? That's your business. As long as the clear sky pagoda doesn't appear, I won't bother to leave this place. Don't you know how comfortable it is to rest in your own space? Xian Yuan snorted and said, cut it out. Comfortable my ass, only you can sleep here. If you don't come with me, I'll tear apart this space of yours. Let's see how you can sleep then. Yin said angrily, are you forcing me? Xian Yuan said proudly, that's right, I am forcing you. So what? Bite me then. Too bad you don't have that ability. You. Yin looked angrily at the giant Xian Yuan sword in the air. He raised his right hand and waved it at Qi Yu and said, human, leave this place first. It seems that if I don't teach this arrogant guy a lesson, he won't know what the 5 elements of heaven and earth are. In this space of 5 elements, the Kongtong seal was the absolute ruler. Qi Yu felt his vision blur. When the surrounding scenery became clear again, he found himself back in the hall. He wasn't worried about the Xian Yuan sword. After all, the Xian Yuan sword was much higher than the Kongtong seal. Moreover, he'd clearly seen a trace of a faint smile appear on the face of the Kongtong seal's spirit at the instant before he left. He didn't have to wait for long. When Qi Yu felt a strong energy fluctuation, he was sucked back into the space of 5 elements. What shocked Qi Yu was that the peaks of the 5 elements were gone. The 5 elemental mountains had already lost their peaks, and Yin was in a very sorry state. 5 undying divine dragons hovered around his body. His originally righteous clothes had become very messy. The light of the Kongtong seal on top of the pentagonal stone pillar had dimmed a lot. Xuanyuan's soul had already revealed his true form. He held the Xian Yuan sword in his hand and looked at Yin. He didn't look much better than Yin. His breath was a little messy, and the light on the Xian Yuan sword wasn't as bright as before. Yin said dejectedly, I didn't expect this. I still can't beat you in my territory. You're still the same old bastard. I don't care, you have to compensate me for my 5 elements mountain. What am I supposed to do if you split them all? Xuanyuan's soul chuckled and said, that's your business, what does it have to do with me? However, if you are willing to come with us, for the sake of a master, after our mission is over, I can consider repairing these broken mountains for you. Pashan? If you didn't rely on your own sharpness, you definitely wouldn't be able to defeat me in my 5 elements mountain space. Don't forget, the 5 elemental energies here are completely under his control, Yin said with dissatisfaction. Xian Yuan said impatiently, all right, be quick. Are you coming with us or not? If you don't want to, then forget it. Don't waste our precious time. Yin glanced at Qi Yu, who had been sucked back into the space, and said, is it him? Xian Yuan, you should know my temper. What makes him qualified to be my master? Xian Yuan shrugged indifferently and said, do whatever you want. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Qi Yu, he wants you to pass his test before he approves of you. Let him see how strong humans have become. Want to fight? Qi Yu had never been afraid of anyone, not even Qi Yu. When he obtained the Xian Yuan sword, he fought with Emperor Huang, and when he obtained the Kunlun mirrors, he made a bet with the immortal in the mirror. Now that he had encountered the Kongtong seal's Yin, he would fight her if she wanted to. He would never back down. Qi Yu looked at Yin and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, how do you want to test me? Please tell me, senior. Yinling's expression became a little better when she saw Qi Yu's respectful expression. She said, as long as you can endure the undying divine dragon's attack for 2 hours, I will acknowledge your strength, provided that you don't have his help. As she spoke, Yinling pointed at Xian Yuan next to her. Fighting the 5 elements undying divine dragons for 2 hours? That's 2 of them disappearing. That doesn't seem possible. Since the undying divine dragons are immortal, I can't destroy them. At the same time, I can't bear to destroy them. If what Xianyuan Hun said was true, that every undying divine dragon's strength was about the same as Little Peng's, then it wouldn't be easy for me to deal with them. Perhaps only the Bull Demon King's strength could easily defeat them when they were besieged. As soon as Qi Yu thought of the Bull Demon King, the latter's voice rang out in his mind. How about it? Do you want to make your second request? Sigh, I'm going to be jealous. After the Xianyuan sword and the Kunlun mirrors, there's actually another divine weapon that might belong to you. Why can't I encounter such a good thing? Don't worry, although these 5 dragons are very powerful, as long as I make a move, passing them will be a piece of cake. At the same time, you won't be breaking the rules. After all, I'm your messenger now. The messenger is a part of Kirin's strength. It would be impossible for Qi Yu not to be tempted. However, after weighing the pros and cons, he still rejected the Bull Demon King's suggestion. The 3 conditions that the Bull Demon King had agreed to were all life-saving straws. Unless his life was in danger, he wouldn't use it easily. Moreover, the Bull Demon King must have heard what Zagru had said in his body, so he naturally knew the secret of Pangu's axe. If he got his hands on Pangu's axe, then there would be too many variables. There's no need for that. Since I'm going to accept the Kongtong Seals test, I'll definitely rely on my own strength. Go to sleep, old bull. I'll wake you up when I need your help. After rejecting the Bull Demon King, Qi Yu nodded at Yinling and said in a deep voice, Senior, let's start now. Regardless of whether he succeeded or failed, he didn't want to waste any more time. Yinling looked at Qi Yu's deep voice with a hint of approval in his eyes. He didn't give any orders, but the 5 undying divine dragons that were originally circling around his body stretched out their huge bodies and pounced in Qi Yu's direction. The bodies of the 5 dragons looked very transparent, as if they were carved from glass. However, Qi Yu knew that the main reason they were called immortal was that their bodies were made up of energy. Physical damage had no effect on them at all. Since these undying divine dragons were undying, it was impossible for him to defeat them without the Xianyuan sword. Since that was the case, Qi Yu gave up on attacking. With a flash, Qi Yu instantly completed the Kirin transformation. Under the effect of the energy enhancement, Qi Yu's body suddenly became agile. He stepped on the Kirin transformation in the air and quickly slipped through the gaps of the 5 giant dragons' bodies before they could pounce on him. From the start of the battle with the 5 elements undying divine dragons, Qi Yu had thought of the silver dragon canopy. The undying divine dragon was a body of energy. In that case, the energy immunity silver dragon barrier would deal the most direct damage to them, and it could even make them lose the ability to fight. However, this idea only flashed across Qi Yu's mind, but he did not put it into action. It was not that he did not want to use it, but the bodies of the 5 elements undying divine dragons were too big. The silver dragon barrier was an energy immunity domain because of its absolute nature. It had a very big limitation, and that was the area that the domain could cover. The silver dragon barrier could not be like the Art of Thousand Changes, which could cover as much as the energy allowed. Instead, it could only maintain an area of no more than 20 square meters. Given that the 5 undying divine dragons were more than 30 meters long, it was impossible for the silver dragon barrier to cover them. Therefore, Qi Yu immediately gave up on the idea of destroying the energy of the other undying divine dragons. Seeing that the 5 giant dragons were pouncing on him again, almost sealing off the entire space, Qi Yu did not panic. He had fought many experts and had rich combat experience. He knew that if he retreated now, he would not be able to hold on for another 2 hours. Now was not the time to save energy. Even if he could not complete the Kongtong Seals test, he must not leave a bad impression on the other party. A huge longsword appeared out of thin air in Qi Yu's right hand. Kirin's illusory form was almost the same size as the Xianyuan sword. After all, Qi Yu was most used to using heavy swords. Floating up, Kirin condensed the thundercloud force with all its might. Holding the sword with both hands, he shouted and unleashed a slash with Kirin's origin power. A silvery white light shot out from the sword, sweeping toward the undying divine dragons. Chiyu was very smart. He did not expand his attack to attack all 5 undying divine dragons at the same time. Instead, he limited the silver light slash to a certain range, using his tyrannical energy control ability to compress the attack as much as possible. A silver light about 1 meter wide reached the charging undying divine dragon in the blink of an eye. A faint light flickered. Chiyu's movements were very fast and very concise. After attacking with the sword, he did not even look at the effect of his attack and directly leaped back, quickly putting some distance between him and the undying divine dragon. At this time, golden wings appeared on his back. With the golden-winged eagle's ability to soar up 90,000 miles, his linear speed had greatly increased. Even if he was facing the undying divine dragon, it would not be much different. Amidst a loud rumble, the all-out attack full of compressed energy collided with the undying divine dragon in the air, triggering a large amount of energy fluctuations. The yellow figure trembled in the air, but in the end it still could not catch up with Chiyu's attack. Chiyu sensed through his chi activity that although the undying divine dragon seemed to be formed from energy, its body was no different from a real body. Under the collision of energy, it actually used its dragon claws to forcefully collide with his own energy. The sharpness of the illusory Qilin and Chi-Yu's tyrannical attack had caused a certain amount of damage to the earth attribute undying divine dragon, leaving a deep scar on its body. The energy within its body had also been twisted into a mess, and it needed to adjust before it could launch another attack. Seeing Chi-Yu's tyrannical attack, Yinling's expression changed slightly. Chi-Yu's tyrannical strength had left a deep impression on him. At this time, the other 4 undying divine dragons had also closed in on Chi-Yu. At the same time, they opened their huge mouths and spouted a huge amount of energy of their own attribute at Chi-Yu. The speed of the energy impact was always faster than flying. In the blink of an eye, it had already covered Chi-Yu's body. With Kirin's illusion in hand, Chi-Yu saw that he had no chance to dodge. He held the sword in front of his chest with both hands and a dark red light instantly rose from his back. In a flash, the light had completely enveloped the 4 dragons. Boom! Although Chi-Yu had used the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique in time, he still suffered a huge energy impact the moment the domain was completed. Fortunately, he was very familiar with the energy usage method of the Azura blade that he had learned in the past. At the same time, when the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique was formed, he instantly dispersed a part of the energy, which allowed him to use the sharpness of Kirin's illusion to break the energy attacking him. The sound of metal cutting and the impact of the 4 different attributes of energy in the energy circulation in his body made Chi-Yu almost spurt out blood. The reason why Chi-Yu did this was very obvious. Of course, he knew that it was impossible for him to destroy the earth attribute undying divine dragon with a full blow. The result he wanted was to slow down the speed of the divine dragon's attack and temporarily separate it from the other 4 undying divine dragons. Judging from the 5 elemental attributes, the earth attribute undying divine dragon was clearly the leader of the 5 undying divine dragons. Moreover, when the 5 elements were gathered, under the effect of the principle of mutual generation, their attacks were bound to be more powerful. At this time, the earth attribute undying divine dragon lagged behind a little, and then used the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique to include the other 4 undying divine dragons into his domain. This immediately broke the 5 elemental formation that they had formed, so that when they attacked, they would not be able to achieve the previous joint effect. Although this would allow the earth attribute undying divine dragons to attack his domain from the outside, it was obviously the best way to separate them now. As expected, when the 4 undying divine dragons entered Chi-Yu's domain, they immediately became a little flustered. When Chi-Yu's figure automatically turned invisible, they immediately began to attack indiscriminately. Using the summer mustard seed ability of the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique, Chi Yu successfully separated the 4 undying divine dragons once again, so that their attack power could only be reflected individually. The earth attribute undying divine dragon outside had already recovered by this time. Since it was immortal, although Chi Yu had injured it quite severely, it had only affected its energy to a certain extent. It let out a deafening dragon roar and immediately pounced toward the huge dark red ball of light in front of it. These undying divine dragons only had some simple, low-level intelligence and did not have very strong thinking abilities. The seal spirit of the Kongtong seal was the true core of this divine weapon. Chi Yu, who was inside the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique, smiled. The moment he saw the earth attribute undying divine dragon pouncing toward his domain, his mental strength suddenly went berserk and abruptly removed the effect of the summer mustard seed ability, causing the 4 undying divine dragons to gather together again. However, he also used the spatial transfer ability in his domain to forcibly adjust the 4 undying divine dragons to face the same direction. The 4 undying divine dragons attacked at the same time, and the 4 types of energy, water, fire, metal, and wood, immediately surged in one direction. At this moment, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique disappeared, and the dark red color disappeared along with it. What appeared in front of the 4 undying divine dragons was a large area of earthy yellow energy attack. Chi Yu floated backwards, quickly adjusting the energy he had expended. When facing multiple enemies, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique could often be used to its greatest effect. It was just like when he first encountered the army of beasts led by the Ox Demon King. At that time, Chi Yu was far less powerful than he was now, but he was still able to rely on his special control of the domain to concentrate the attacks of the 3 Beast Kings on the Ox Demon King and almost cause him great harm. Although the energy of the 4 undying divine dragons was not weak, there was still a gap between them and the 3 Beast Kings. Therefore, it was not difficult to simply change the direction of their energy. 4 against 1. Without any suspense, the huge body of the earth attribute undying divine dragon was immediately engulfed by the energy of its companions. The earthy yellow light completely disappeared in midair. Just as the 4 undying divine dragons were in a daze after destroying their companions, the dark red energy once again enveloped their bodies under Chi Yu's ingenious control. This time, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique enveloped the 3 undying divine dragons, leaving only the fire attribute undying divine dragon outside. As his strength increased, Chi Yu's control of this magical domain became more and more proficient. Unless it was a super powerhouse like the Bull Demon King, it would not be easy to deal with his domain. The fire attribute undying divine dragon was stunned for a moment. He, who only had a low level of intelligence, clearly did not know why the earth attribute undying divine dragon was destroyed. When he saw the dark red light directly enveloping his 3 companions, he did not hesitate to launch an attack. At this time, using the same method, the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique disappeared again. 3 against 1. It was still a battle without any suspense. The fire attribute undying divine dragon also disappeared into thin air after the earth attribute undying divine dragon. Chi Yu's heart was filled with excitement. Although he had deliberately planned this battle, he did not expect the results to be so good. Moreover, the use of the infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique did not consume too much of his energy. The thundercloud force was enhanced. This allowed him to control the entire domain as if it was his own arm, and he could control it as he pleased. Seeing that there were only 3 undying divine dragons left in front of him, Chi Yu was about to repeat the same trick. He was surprised to see that a yellow light had already lit up behind Yinling, and at this moment, the Kongtong seal flashed with a yellow light. The earth attribute undying divine dragon was already in the process of recovering, and it would not be long before it could attack him again. Seeing this scene, Chi-Yu was not alarmed, but rather delighted. He knew that although the 5 guardian divine dragons were known to be undying, it would ultimately take time for them to recover from the destruction of their energy. He couldn't attack immediately after his body was destroyed. As long as that was the case, then, as long as this was the case, today's problem would be easily solved. As long as he could destroy these 5 undying divine dragons one by one, when they recovered, they would only be able to recover one at a time. Given his strength, he would not be able to defeat all 5 of them, but if there was only one, it would be much easier. As he pondered, Chi-Yu's hands did not stop moving. The infinite changes of 4 stars boundary technique appeared again and enveloped 2 undying divine dragons at almost the same time. 2 against 1, the same result allowed him to destroy another opponent. At this time, Yinling's expression had completely changed. Whatever Chi-Yu could think of, the soul of the divine weapon could also think of. He knew that there was no point in continuing the battle at this point. He directly withdrew the remaining 2 undying divine dragons and said in a deep voice, "That's enough." Kiran's illusion disappeared, and Chi-Yu smiled and nodded. "Senior, do I pass the test?" Yinling nodded and said, "Yes, you pass. However, I really want to know what kind of domain ability you used just now. Even with my mental strength, I couldn't break into it to control the undying divine dragons. This is the first time I've seen such a domain." Chi-Yu said, "This domain is called the Infinite Changes of 4 Stars Boundary Technique, and it's an ability bestowed upon me by a senior. Simply put, its characteristics are very similar to the Kunlun Divine Illusion of Kunlun Mirrors, and it relies on illusions and spatial changes within the domain to achieve its goals. At the same time, it can also enhance or weaken energy to a certain extent." Yinling suddenly understood and said, "I see. You took advantage of the undying divine dragon's low intelligence to break their joint attack. However, your action at the beginning was the most crucial. You forcibly separated the 5 undying divine dragons before they completed the 5 elements harmony. Otherwise, you might not have been able to use this domain." Chi-Yu scratched his head and said, "I was just lucky." Yinling snorted and said, "If there's really so much luck in the world, why do we need divine weapons? It's not luck, but the effect of practical experience." Xianyuan was in a good mood. He laughed and said, "What do you think? I didn't follow the wrong person, did I? Although Chi-Yu's current strength isn't enough to display our true power, even I can't help but be shocked by the speed of his growth. He has great potential for development. You should also feel the natural aura on his body, which has a strong nourishing effect on your 5 elements energy. The test is over, so you shouldn't hesitate anymore." Yinling smiled and said, "You? In fact, do you think I have any other choice after meeting you? If I don't agree, you'll tear me apart if you don't agree. I didn't expect that we could join forces again after so many years. But I don't know what enemy we're going to face this time." Xianyuan floated to Yinling's side. The 2 stretched out their right hands at the same time and shook hands in the air. Xuanyuan's soul said emotionally, "Left Kongtong, right Xianyuan, heaven and earth shocking sword and seal harmony. Old friend, we're finally together again." Yinling said snappily, "Don't flatter me. There's no other way to be with you. I can't continue the peace I've enjoyed for so many years." The process of the master recognition was very simple. After checking Chi-Yu's body, the Kongtong seal directly fused with his Kirin Pearl, turning the pearl-like Pearl Kirin Pearl into a jade-like shape. The fusion. Not only did it make the Kirin Pearl bigger, but it also made it easier to control everything inside the Kirin Pearl. There was no Kirin Pearl, but there was the Kongtong seal, which had the ability of the Kirin Pearl. Chi-Yu's wait for more than a month was not in vain. Under the guidance of the Kongtong seal, he finally left the space of the 5 Elements Mountain and came to the main hall of the Saint Buddha Temple. When Chi-Yu appeared in the main hall, Zagru was already waiting for him. He glanced at the Kirin pearl hanging on Chi-Yu's neck, which had turned into a pentagonal jade pendant. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Congratulations. Now you really have the ability to lead the East to face all enemies." Chi-Yu bowed respectfully to Zagru. He said, "This is all thanks to Master's guidance. I must leave immediately. My companions are still waiting for me in the ancient beasts period. I must hurry back to meet them." Zagru nodded and said, "You will come back to Tibet soon. Chi-Yu, I won't persuade you anymore. I just hope that you can think about who the enemy you will face in the near future is. For the future of more people. You have to be clear about this. Do you understand?" Chi-Yu was silent for a moment. He looked at Zagru's clear eyes and sighed. "Master, I understand what you mean. I can only say that I will do my best. However, I can't guarantee anything. I'm leaving. Take care, Master." As the door opened, Chi-Yu turned into a wisp of smoke and left. With his exquisite control of energy, he could completely control the energy around his body. After leaving the St. Buddha temple, Chi-Yu was in a very good mood. Although Zagru's last words made him ponder, some things could no longer be changed. He simply didn't think too much about it. He quickly left the St. Buddha temple and headed for the capital. After his water and fire thundercloud force were completely upgraded to the 8 Clouds realm, Chi-Yu's flying speed was almost the same as Little Peng. Because of his excitement, he didn't even summon Little Peng this time. Instead, he relied on his own power to fly towards the capital. The 5 elements mountain space could be said to have benefited Chi-Yu a lot. Not only did he wait for Xuanyuan's soul to wake up, but he also upgraded 2 of his 4 thundercloud force to the 8 Clouds realm. He also obtained the Kongtong seal, one of the top 10 artifacts. With the Kongtong seal, Chi-Yu believed that even if Bull Demon King had the ability to break the life and death domain, he would have to think twice if he wanted to fight against him. The power of 2 artifacts was much stronger than a single artifact. Seeing that the capital was getting closer and closer, Chi-Yu woke up from the excitement of the energy upgrade. He was about to reach home. Then, should he go and see his parents? After knowing his identity, how would they face him? Or in other words, how should he face them? After all, they were his parents. It was impossible to escape, and Chi-Yu didn't want to escape. Seeing that the capital was right in front of him, he simply let go of his body and mind and let nature take its course. Facing it calmly might be the best way for now. Quietly landing in the Dragon Field courtyard, Chi-Yu immediately felt Snow Girl's aura. He didn't hide his own aura either. Before he walked towards the villa, a cyan figure had already flown out and fell into his arms. "Chi-Yu, you're back." Snow Girl excitedly hugged his neck and jumped. Looking at her somewhat resentful gaze, Chi-Yu couldn't help but smile and said, "Silly girl, I'm back now, aren't I?" Snow Girl unhappily snorted and said, "You said you'd come back as soon as possible, but you've been gone for dozens of days." This time, she finally got some alone time with Chi-Yu, but Chi-Yu had left for so long. Seeing that they were about to return to the era of the ancient beasts, it was normal for her to be unhappy. Chi-Yu said, let's go back first." As he said that, he took Snow Girl's little hand and went directly back to the room. Snow Girl poured a glass of water for Chi-Yu and asked, "Why were you gone for so long?" "I was worried to death. You don't know, Uncle and Auntie would call almost every morning and evening to ask about you. In the end, I didn't have the heart to tell them that you haven't returned." Hearing Snow Girl mention his parents, Chi-Yu's eyes showed a trace of complicated feelings. "Are they okay?" The Snow Lady shook her head and said, "Even though I haven't seen them recently, I'm sure they're not in a good state, considering how anxious they are because of you. Chi-Yu, no matter what, before we leave, you must see them one last time. Don't tell me you still blame them for being wary of you that day?" Chi-Yu shook his head, smiled slightly, and said, "How can that be? After all, they are my parents. How can I really blame them? It's just that I was a little depressed at that time." It wasn't easy for me to find my parents, but I couldn't recognize them. That feeling was very difficult for me to accept. But this time I went to Tibet, I thought it through. It can be seen that because of my disappearance they also suffered a lot. Wealth can't bring spiritual sustenance. So, we are all victims. After all, they are my biological parents. Don't worry, before I leave, I will definitely see them. Snow Girl breathed a sigh of relief and said, I'm relieved that you can think like this. Well, tell me what you've been doing in Tibet these days. Looking at Snow Girl's curious look, Chi-Yu couldn't help but pinch her cute little nose and said with a smile, This time I went to Tibet, I gained a lot. I understood some things that I couldn't figure out before, and at the same time, my strength has improved to a certain extent. Now, even if I face Chi-Yu again, I am confident that I won't lose. At that moment, he told Snow Girl what had happened to him in Tibet, hiding the matter about the Eastern mythology. After all, it was a leak of heavenly secrets. The fewer people who knew, the better. Moreover, it was meaningless for Snow Girl to know. Chapter 254. Chi-Yu looked at the bright sky outside and said, Snow Girl, I'm a little worried about everyone. Let's go back tonight. I'm afraid that Chi-Yu has already healed his injuries. After all, he has Panga's axe, and we can't treat him with common sense. There was a trace of disappointment in Snow Girl's eyes, but she still nodded and said, Okay. We'll leave whenever you say so. However, there are some things I need to tell you now. Our Kirin group is developing faster than we thought. General G called about half a month ago and said that the national leaders have fully recognized our company's fruit and praised it. However, in order to ensure that the company's fruit supply to the national leaders is not leaked, everything has to be done in secret. And the country will not treat us badly. Although they will not pay us to buy the fruit, they will specially adjust our company's tax to half of the previous one. At the same time, under the influence of the country, our products have been widely promoted. The national leaders are very appreciative of you. The biggest help for us is to broadcast our company's promotional video on national television during prime time. It will be broadcast once a week for a year. Such a publicity effect is not a problem of a little money. With the support of the country, coupled with the promotion of the customers who bought our products in the early stage, our first batch of products has been sold, and the second batch is also in the process of preparing to go on the market. The initial investment has been fully recovered. Now, Sister Guan won't say that your price is too high. She even wants to reduce the price. Although she works hard every day, she is very happy when she sees the financial statements. Speaking of this, Snow Girl couldn't help but laugh. Hearing that the company was on the right track, Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel relieved. He really didn't have time to take care of the company's affairs. It was already very good to be able to have such result. After laughing, Snow Girl continued, Also, because the effect of our company's products is very obvious, it has attracted the attention of some foreign counterparts. Now, there are 7 countries' counterparts who have asked us for the agency rights of our product. How do you think we should deal with this matter? Chi-Yu thought about it and said, This is simple. Everything will be done according to the normal procedures. We don't need agents. Everything will be done through direct sales. We must control our own product. Because our natural fruits are unique, we are not afraid of competition at all. Even if their competitors had the cultivation method, they wouldn't be able to cultivate the same fruit without the environment of the ancient beast. Don't worry now. Call Sister Moon Guan later. After we leave, she will be in charge of all the company's affairs. Don't worry about the exit for now. Let's talk about it after we come back. Let her establish a foothold in the country first and increase the promotion of our company's product. When we come back, I believe that we have accumulated a certain amount of capital. That will be the best time for us to enter the international market. After all, we are a newly developed company. I still need a lot of time to integrate the immature aspects. Snow Girl nodded and said, Sister Moongate and I also think so after discussing it. Now was not the time to rush development. They had to stabilize the situation first. Moreover, our company's products also need to better establish a solid customer base. Only after we have a stable income can we plan to develop our product. However, I don't know why, but recently, the foreign media seems to be paying attention to our small company. I heard from Sister Moongate that there are a lot of reports about us abroad. Should we investigate this matter? Chiyu shook his head and said, "Our energy is limited after all. We are leaving soon. Sister Moongate can't handle it alone. Let's put it aside first. When we return from the ancient beasts period, we will deal with these matters. Oh, by the way, tell Sister Moongate that if the conditions are right, we will buy 2 more large cold storages. We can't always go to the ancient beasts period. This time, we have to bring back as many fruits as possible." Snow Girl said with some worry, "But, in that case, will the time affect the quality of the fruits?" Chiyu smiled slightly, shook his head and said, "How can that be? Don't forget, I am the source of nature. And with Sister Plant Soul's understanding of plants, as long as a certain amount of natural energy is steadily injected into the warehouse, there will be no problem." Snow Girl said, "So that's how it is. Then, let's do it." Chiyu's eyes showed deep emotions and said, "We are leaving tonight. Accompany me to meet them. I think they must have left their phone number for you." Snow Girl naturally knew who Chiyu was talking about. She said, "Then should I call them now?" Chiyu took out his phone and said, "I will call them myself. Tell me their number." After all, they were his biological parents. It was better to solve these problems by himself. He dialed Chi Tianlei's phone number, according to the Snow Girl told him. Hearing that the call had been connected, it was impossible for Chi Yu not to be nervous. "This is Chi Tianlei, who is it?" Chi Tianlei's voice was still so majestic. It was full of magnetism, and even Chi Yu felt very comfortable listening to it. The phone number that Chi Tianlei had left for the Snow Lady was a private number that wasn't open to the public. His secretary was usually the one who answered the phone for business purposes. "It's me." Chiyu was silent for a while before answering. Perhaps because of his emotions, his voice was a little low. Chi Tianlei was stunned at first, and then his voice changed. It was no longer calm, but full of excitement. "Chiyu, is that you? Where are you now?" Hearing his father's voice and his excited and intimate emotions, Chiyu's nervous mood slightly relaxed. He said, "I am at the Dragonfield courtyard." Before Chiyu could continue, Chi Tianlei quickly interrupted, "You are finally back. Okay, wait for us there, we will go immediately." After saying this, he immediately hung up. Chiyu looked at the phone in his hand in a daze. Chi Tianlei's eagerness made him feel a strong sense of kinship. They are coming, they are coming. Thinking that he was about to meet his parents, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He quickly changed into a set of clean clothes and deliberately shaved to make himself look more refreshed. It was as if he was preparing for a blind date, nervous with a bit of excitement. Snow Girl looked at Chiyu with a smile. She hadn't seen Chiyu so excited for a long time. Being able to reunite with her biological parents, Snow Girl's joy was no less than Chiyu's. What she wanted most was for Chiyu to be happy. Perhaps this was the emotion that would appear after loving someone. After Chiyu fixed himself up, he immediately brought Snow Girl to the hall. At first, he was able to stroll calmly in the hall, but after walking 2 laps, he couldn't help but think in his heart, "When Chi Tianlei and his wife arrive, what should I say first? Should I directly go up to them and reunite with them? Or should I first sound them out and see how they are prepared to treat me?" Along with the random thoughts in his mind, Chiyu's mood became more and more restless. Strolling from inside the villa to outside, he stood not far from the gate of the courtyard and anxiously waited. He even released his spiritual force, feeling the breath of life from the vehicles passing in every direction around the courtyard. In fact, doing this was completely futile. Chi Tianlei and his wife didn't have special abilities. Naturally, they wouldn't have energy sensing on their body. They were no different from ordinary people. Even if his spiritual force was strong, it was after all not his eyes. It was impossible for him to see them. Qi Tianlei and his wife's anxious mood was no less than Qi Yu's. Without letting him wait for too long, the sound of brakes came from outside the courtyard gate, followed by a clear horn sound, waking Qi Yu up from his restlessness. "Open the door," Qi Yu called out to Snow Girl. Snow Girl was already prepared. The gate of the courtyard opened. A limited edition Rolls-Royce Phantom came in from the outside. The body of the car was extended, and the logo of the angel on the front of the car looked very eye-catching. However, Qi Yu, who had always loved cars, had no time to pay attention to this. His eyes were like lightning, piercing straight into the car. As soon as the Rolls-Royce entered the gate, it stopped. Without waiting for the driver to get out of the car to open the door, the rear door opened automatically. Qi Yu, who was still thinking about how to face his parents, saw a petite figure jump out of the car. She really did jump out, and in the next moment, she was already in front of him. It was Ying Xiaodai. Just as Qi Yu was about to say something, Ying Xiaodai hugged him with tears streaming down her face. My child, you're finally back. Do you know how hard it was for your mother to wait for you?" At this moment, Qi Yu's mind was completely blank. All the words he had thought of before disappeared. His mother's words evoked the strongest emotion in his heart. He could not control his tears at all. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and threw himself into his mother's arms. Qi Yu's voice was full of emotion, but he only managed to choke out one word, "Mom." The mother and son hugged each other and cried loudly. Qi Yu seemed to want to express all the sorrow he had suffered as an orphan for 20 years, and Ying Xiaodai seemed to want to completely release the 20 years of longing she had for her son. The mother and son hugged each other and cried. Snow Girl, who was standing on the side, could not help but think of her parents and relatives when she saw this shocking scene. Tears flowed down her cheeks and she could not help but sigh. Qi Tianlei's pace was no longer as steady as usual. He got out of the car only a little slower than Ying Xiaodai. He came to Qi Yu and Ying Xiaodai's side, opened his wide arms, and hugged his wife and son. He murmured, choking with sobs, "Reunited. Our family is finally reunited." Uncle Zhou was standing at the door of the villa at this time, and Snow Girl was also standing beside him. However, at this moment no one wanted to ruin this moment. Seeing the reunion of Qi Yu and his family, they all silently wished them well in their hearts, and were moved. After crying for a long time, Qi Yu's emotions gradually stabilized. Because of the physical contact, he found that his mother's heart was a little overwhelmed because she was too excited. Only then did he wake up from his complicated emotions. A gentle and warm energy flowed into Ying Xiaodai's body through Qi Yu's big hand. The comfortable feeling calmed her excited emotions, and the gentle energy slowly affected her body. Ying Xiaodai's crying gradually stopped. Raising his head, Qi Yu wiped the tears off his face and looked at his mother, who was close at hand. For a moment, he could not speak at all. Ying Xiaodai held Qi Yu's shoulders with both hands and said, "Child, get up quickly. The ground is cold." Qi Yu stood up with the help of his mother. He was half a head taller than his father, Qi Tianlei. Looking at her son, who was not handsome but had a stalwart figure and exuded a noble temperament, the sadness in Ying Xiaodai's heart gradually disappeared and was replaced by pride and joy. "Child, you've made me wait for so long. This month, I've been thinking about you every moment. Fortunately, you're finally back." Ying Xiaodai held Qi Yu's hand tightly and did not let go. Looking at her son's white hair, she could not help but feel a surge of sadness in her heart again. Seeing that his wife was about to cry again, Qi Tianlei hurriedly said, "Let's go. Let's talk inside." As he spoke, he patted Qi Yu's shoulder with a kind light in his eyes. Once upon a time, how he wished to have a warm family. But now, all of this had come at the same time. The parents he longed for had finally come to his side. This feeling made Chi Yu forget about his nervousness, and his emotions were in a state of extreme excitement. He could not calm down for a long time. The three of them came to the villa's hall and sat down. Qi Tianlei sat opposite Qi Yu, while Ing Xiaodai insisted on sitting next to her son. She sat next to Qi Yu and held his hand. Feeling the warm aura constantly released from his mother's body, Qi Yu's eyes could not help but reveal a trace of childish emotions. Qi Tianlei sighed. 20 years, a whole 20 years we finally found you. Qi Yu, I know you may be blaming us. You didn't see us until today, 20 years later. You must have suffered a lot in these past 20 years. But can you understand the painstaking efforts of me and your mother? Back then, it wasn't that we abandoned you. It was our business competitor who stole my most beloved son in order to take revenge on us. Later, although I had my revenge, the last news I received was that the killer who stole you had vanished from the face of the earth. I used all the manpower and resources, but I never received any news about you. I don't know how many times your mother cried over losing you. Later we had Ying. After having Ying, we decided not to have any more children because we already had a son. We always believed that you were still alive in this world. To be honest, I'm a very selfish person, and I'm not that passionate about charity work. However, since you disappeared, your mother and I have put a lot of energy into charity work, so that we can move the heavens and one day send you back to us. 20 years, a whole 20 years. Today you finally appeared in front of us. Child, can you forgive me and your mother? Seeing Qi Tianlei's eyes that had become red from excitement, Qi Yu forcefully shook his head and choked with sobs. No, you don't need my forgiveness at all. Because, after I found out about the situation back then, I didn't hate you at all. You also thought that I was suffering a lot from my disappearance. All of this can only be said to be the heavens playing tricks on our family. Dad. The last words suddenly made Qi Tianlei unable to control his emotions. For a moment, he couldn't help but burst into tears. What could be happier than having a son at an old age? Looking at his son, he was completely emotional and speechless. Ing Xiaodai leaned on Qi Yu's shoulder and cried again. Having obtained Qi Yu's approval, Qi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai were now emotional, but inwardly, they were extremely excited. Originally, they thought that Qi Yu hadn't seen them for so long because he was still blaming them. But now, it seemed that everything was not a problem. His son had really returned to his side. The excitement of the family lasted for half an hour before they gradually calmed down. Ing Xiaodai gently wiped away the tears on her son's face. Because she was sitting next to Qi Yu, she couldn't help but smile as she felt her son's strong body. Child, you are much stronger than your father. It's been hard on you not being by our side for 20 years. Holding his mother's hand, Qi Yu gently shook his head and said, The past is the past. Mom, you don't have to blame yourself anymore. Actually, I'm also at fault. If my emotions were more stable when I saw you before, maybe our family would have already acknowledged each other. Later, because there were some things that I had to deal with, I came back late. I made you worry. Qi Tianlei listened to Qi Yu and waved his hand. He let the security guards behind him leave the villa, and then said to Qi Yu, I found out about your identity through some aspects, but I found out that your file is very mysterious. The last place it ended was in Qingbei University. Moreover, you dropped out halfway. There was no file at all after that. Even the Kirin group that you founded is pitiful in the file. As far as I know, you should be someone from an important department of the country. Naturally, there was nothing to hide from his parents. Qi Yu, Dad, I don't belong to any department of the country. But I have the approval of the country. How should I put it, my identity is quite special. From the country's point of view, I actually only have a Diamond Guardian medal and certain privileges. There's nothing else, and the country won't deliberately control what I do. Diamond Guardian medal? Hearing this name, Qi Tianlei and his wife were both shocked. Although they had a very close relationship with the police, they didn't receive such information. However, they had heard about the meaning of the Diamond Guardian Medal. Only those who have made great contributions to the country are qualified to receive it. Moreover, the owner of the Diamond Guardian Medal would only listen to the orders of the president. It could be said to be the highest standard of honor in the entire Yenwang Republic, and their son actually had such an honor. It could be seen how extraordinary his identity was. Chi-Yu looked at his parents' surprised expression and continued, simply put, we are a group. In terms of title, we are the Guardians of the East. Our mission is to protect the East. When there are some things that the country can't solve, we will step forward and be responsible for resolving these crises. Chi Tianlei thought about it and said, so, you are an organization? Chi Tianlei thought for a moment and said, so, you're an organization? Chi Tianlei thought about it and said, so, you are an organization? Chi-Yu shook his head. No, that's not it. Kirin Group is just something I came up with. I hope to make it my career. After all, it's not good for a man to not have his own career. Just like here. This is Ryua's villa. I can't not have my own house. And if I want to have everything, I must first have the capital. Are you talking about Hai Ryua? This girl was very capable. It was fortunate that her parents were so reassured to hand over the company to a girl in her 20s. If it weren't for the limitations of their company's own business projects, Longyu Group would have even greater development. When it came to economic issues, Chi Tianlei suddenly became spirited. Chi-Yu smiled bitterly and said, actually, my Kirin Group was borrowed from Ryua. When the company is on track, I will return the money to her. Before Chi Tianlei could speak, Ing Xiaodai said, borrow money? Why would our son need to borrow money? How much did he borrow? Tell me, I will ask someone to return it to Longyu Courtyard. Chi-Yu looked at his concerned mother with a smile and said, no need. I want to be self-reliant. In fact, when I learned that you might be my biological parents that day, I hesitated in my heart. So, after thinking about it, it's normal for you to doubt my identity. After all, you are second to none in the country. How can I not arouse suspicion and speculation when I rashly recognize my relatives? Dad, Mom, let me try to manage the company on my own. I just want to do my own business. It doesn't matter to me if I have more money, I just want to enjoy the feeling of success. In fact, when you told me that you had transferred all your assets to my sister, I felt much more relaxed. At least now, no one will say that I'm going to steal your asset. Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai looked at each other with approval in their eyes. Chi Tianlei smiled and said, good. You're worthy of being my son. You're ambitious. I also know that with your special identity, I'm afraid you won't be able to inherit our family business. But it doesn't matter, your sister's share will naturally be given to her. But you are also our child, we will treat you equally in this regard. Don't be in a hurry to refuse, I won't give it to you. You don't lack money anyway. When you have a child, I can give it to my grandson. You don't have the right to refuse for my grandson. Looking at the proud smile in Chi Tianlei's eyes, Chi-Yu really felt helpless. However, he also deeply felt his parents' determination to make it up to him. Then you will have to wait. At least in a short period of time, the possibility of me getting married is very small. Chi Tianlei smiled and said, it doesn't matter whether you get married or not. Shui-Er is so beautiful. When you have a child in the future, he will be more handsome than you. If the girl looks like Shui-Er, it will be perfect. Don't worry, even if you don't get married, when you have a child, I have a way to let him be fully recognized by the law. Why did they jump to the topic of children after just a few words? Chi-Yu was a little embarrassed, and Snow Girl was already blushing. Ing Xiaodai nodded in agreement and said, that's right, your father is right. You have to work hard. The sooner you have a child, the better we can have grandchildren. Our family has a small island in the international waters. The environment there is very beautiful. When we have grandchildren, your father and I will bring the children there to retire. Oh, right. Our family is special. As long as you have the ability, have a few more children. The more the better. As she spoke, Xiaodai was already smiling so widely that her eyes were squinted, obviously fantasizing about having a house full of children and grandchildren. Qiyu looked at Snow Girl awkwardly, but Snow Girl didn't look at him. She giggled and said, "Auntie, I'm afraid this hope of yours is very easy to solve. Qiyu has a lot of female confidants. If each of them can give birth to a child, they can probably form a basketball team." Xiaodai and Qi Tianlei couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this. They looked at Qiyu and didn't know what to say. Qi Tianlei coughed awkwardly. In this regard, men always acted like men. However, Xiaodai was a little unhappy and scolded Qiyu. "You child, Schwerer is so good. You actually have other women behind her back. How can you face her? Listen to your mother, break up with those outside and be good to Schwerer. Of course, if you have children with other girls, don't worry and bring them back. Your mother will take care of them for you." This. Looking at Xiaodai, Qiyu really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, the strong familial love that he had never felt before warmed his heart. This was the feeling of home. Snow Girl walked to Xiaodia's side and sat on the sofa's armrest. "Auntie, don't make things difficult for him. In fact, I'm the last one to establish a relationship with Qiyu. I'm the latecomer. If you do this, won't he dump me first?" Xiaodai was stunned. Seeing that Snow Girl didn't look angry at all, she couldn't help but feel strange. Is that so? But don't you want to monopolize him and become Qiyu's wife? Snow Girl looked at Qiyu bitterly and said, "Auntie, it's not that I don't want to, but that's simply impossible. Even I don't know how many women Qiyu has. He's not destined to belong to just one person." Xiaodai looked at Qiyu blankly. This situation was obviously something she couldn't understand. Qiyu took this opportunity to quickly say, "Mom, let's discuss this later. But I'm afraid I won't be able to get married in this life, because I can't let any of them down." Qi Tianlei frowned, "But you're letting each of them down. Which girl doesn't want to get married? How about this, tell me first, how many women do you have?" Qiyu looked at his father's unhappy expression and tentatively said, No, 5. Snow Girl, Wen Ting, Shangbing, Ryue, and Ming Ming added up to exactly 5. Of course, he would include Wen Ting, because in his heart, Wen Ting was not dead at all. Qi Tianlei looked at his son in surprise. "Can you do it? You found 5 wives at once. Although I know you're not an ordinary person, you still have to take care of your body." Xiaodai snorted and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't lead your son astray." Qi Tianlei snappily said, "Do you still need me to teach your son? I haven't even taught him and he already has 5. Otherwise, you'd really want him to find a strong girlfriend." Xiaodai stared at Qi Tianlei and said, "What, my son? Isn't he also your son? All right, it's not easy to see our son, don't scold him. I believe you is confident, let's let nature take its course." Qi Tianlei nodded and said, "That's the only way. But you inform me in advance when you're ready to get married. No matter how many women you have, I have a way to let you marry all of them. After all, we're not ordinary people." Qiyu looked at Qi Tianlei. For a moment he didn't know what to say. His father was really resourceful. Was the problem that had been bothering him so easy to solve from his mouth? Qi Tianlei said, Now that we've recognized you, when you're free, come to the Golden Grain Group. I'll officially announce your identity at the board meeting. As my son, and an adult at that, I've already thought it through. The affairs of the Kirin Group are your own business. I promise I won't interfere. However, there's a precondition. You must come to the Golden Grain Group as a deputy general manager. Don't worry, it's not a position. You only need to come to work 1 day a week. Apart from the board of directors, the main management of the group is me and your mother. There are 8 or 9 positions above the deputy general manager, so you don't need to worry about anything. Chi-Yu thought about it and said, "There's no need, this is just a formality." Chi Tianlei insisted, "No, you're my son. If you don't work part-time in the company now, some things will be difficult in the future. If you don't agree, don't blame me for not helping you when you want to marry a wife. Anyway, even if you don't get married, I have ways to handle all kinds of normal procedures for your children in the future." Chapter 255. Listening to Chi-Yu's words, Chi Tianlei sternly said, "Child, I can imagine that you have a very important responsibility, but there is one thing you must promise us, and that is your safety. No matter what you do, you have to remember that your family is waiting for your return at home." Chi-Yu nodded and said, "Dad, Mom, you can rest assured that I will pay attention to my safety. Wanting to hurt me is not an easy thing to do. Tonight, Snow Girl and I will leave the capital and will be back in about a month. After that, I will not be away for too long. I will be filial to you." Listening to Chi-Yu say that he would leave tonight, Chi Tianlei and his wife's faces showed a look of loss at the same time. In shout, I couldn't help but ask, "Is it really that urgent?" Chi-Yu nodded his head. "Mom, we've just reunited, and I can't bear to leave you guys. However, my companions are all waiting for me to return. I have no choice but to rush back. However, I will try to come back as soon as possible. I hope to be with you for a few days." "Oh, right, have you found the person who ordered the bandits to attack the Golden Grain Building?" Hearing Chi-Yu mention the incident last time, Chi Tianlei's eyes flashed with killing intent. "There is no need to look, I have a rough idea who it is." This time, they actually went too far. Do they really think that I, Chi Tianlei, am made of paper? Speaking of the incident last time, fortunately you were there. Otherwise, if Yingying was kidnapped by them, it would be troublesome. Chi-Yu thought that there was someone secretly trying to harm his parents. He couldn't help but worry a little. An invisible murderous aura filled the air, and the temperature of the entire hall seemed to drop a bit. "Dad, who is it? Let me help you solve the problem once and for all." Feeling the cold aura exuding from Chi-Yu, Chi Tianlei couldn't help but be startled and quickly said, "No, don't get involved. The relationship is very complicated, and it is related to the future of the entire Golden Grain Group. Let me handle it." Although this incident had caused great damage to the group itself and its reputation, it had also completely exposed those guys' wild ambitions. It would not be so easy for them to take action again. Now, these people are very restrained. They are afraid that I will find some evidence. Chi-Yu thought for a moment and said, "No matter what, you must pay attention to your own safety. If there's a problem and I'm not around, you can call this number for help." Chi-Yu took out a note that he had prepared earlier and handed it to Chi Tianlei. General Ji's phone number was written on it. General Ji had the Yen Huang soul in his hands. Within the country, there was probably nothing that the Yellow Flame soul could not solve. Chi Tianlei glanced at the phone number and Ji Zhongming's name. He was shocked. Ji Zhongming? Isn't this the famous Iron Blood general of our country? Are you related to him? Snow Girl smiled and said, "Of course it's related. One of Chi Yu's confidants is General Ji Zhongming's only daughter." Chi Tianlei looked at his son strangely. He thought to himself, this kid is really something. However, when he needs to deal with emotional problems in the future, it will probably not be so easy. The family of three no longer talked about business and Chi Yu's identity. Chi Tianlei and his wife were most interested in Chi Yu's previous life. Unknowingly, they had already chatted from afternoon to night. During the process of chatting, Chi Yu secretly transferred some of his source of nature energy into the couple's body, slightly improving their physical condition. As for the transformation, it would have to wait until he returned from the ancient beast era. Ing Xiaodai personally cooked for her son and cooked a sumptuous dinner with Snow Girl. The family was happy and harmonious. Feeling the unprecedented familial love, Chi Yu was in a much better mood. Since returning from London, He was back to himself for the first time. He was no longer the leader of the Zodiac army, but the son of the couple in front of him. However, happy times are always short-lived. The sky was completely dark, and Chi Tianlei and his wife finally had to leave. Under their ardent urging and reluctance, Chi Yu saw them out of the gate of the villa. After returning to the villa, Chi Yu and Snow Girl walked back to their room. The first thing Chi Yu did was to summon Little Peng. With Little Peng's strength, under the effect of energy, it condensed its body into the size of a laughing parrot. Its golden feathers looked very divine. Dong Peng, you should have seen the couple just now. We are going back to the ancient beast era. Now I will give you a task. In the shortest time possible, find a fierce beast with at least 6,000 years of cultivation in the vicinity of the capital, subdue it, and order it to protect the couple at all times. I'll give you an hour. I'll let you decide what to do next. Little Peng nodded to Chi Yu and directly flew out of the window. If one were to say that he was extremely unwilling to become Chi Yu's envoy at the start, then now he was completely convinced. After Chi Yu obtained the Kongtong seal, he knew that even if he reached the strength of his father, the great Peng Wisdom King, as long as Chi Yu did not agree, he could only become this strong man's envoy forever. As Chi Yu's envoy, Little Peng found that his cultivation was improving rapidly under the influence of the origin of nature. He felt that it was definitely worth it to use 5 years of time to help this person in exchange for greater power. After letting Little Peng go, Chi Yu used his mental strength and the aura of the origin of nature to maintain contact with him. With Chi Yu's current strength, as long as Little Peng did not leave the capital, there would be no problem. Especially after obtaining the Kongtong seal, it had indescribable benefits for converging and condensing mental strength. During the time when Little Peng was away, Chi Yu and Snow Girl came to the warehouse of the Dragon Field courtyard and stored all the ammunition that Chi Yu had obtained through the contact information left by Hu Guang during the time that Snow Girl had gone to Tibet into the Kongtong seal. With these ammunition, the 4 tribes of the ancient beasts period could hold on for a long time. Of course, Chi Yu would not use the weapons of the Sacred Flame sect for nothing. After the first batch of Kirin Group's products was sold, he had already paid for the previous weapons and ammunition. After Chi Yu and Xiao Luo were done with their preparations, he gave General Ji a call and told him about his parents' situation. General Ji promised him that he would send 4 people from the Soul of Yan Huang to protect Chi Tianlei and his wife. In this way, Chi Yu could leave with peace of mind. After reuniting with his parents, Chi Yu was in a good mood. However, when he finished arranging everything in the modern world and returned to the ancient beasts period through the Kunlun mirrors, his good mood instantly disappeared. The energy of the Kunlun mirrors sent them directly to the camp of the 4 tribes of the ancient beasts period. When the 2 of them appeared, the first thing they saw was a scene of devastation. The camp of the 4 families was now only 2/3 of its original size, and the 1/3 that had disappeared had become a piece of scorched earth. In the entire camp, cries and wails could be heard everywhere, as if lives were disappearing every minute. Seeing the miserable scene in front of him, Chi Yu could not help but feel like his heart was in his throat. When he had left, the situation was still very good, but now it had become like this. Obviously, a huge change had occurred. Without any delay, Chi Yu immediately returned to the camp where the Zodiac army was. The situation in the Zodiac army camp was similar to the outside. Injured members of the 12 Zodiac teams could be seen everywhere. Chi Yu found that at least 2/3 of the people were injured, and their injuries were very serious. However, to his relief, at least none of them were dead. Chi Yu. Ming Ming threw herself at him like a swallow. When Chi Yu returned, the aura that he emitted had been noticed by all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Ming Ming looked much more haggard than before he had left. Her pretty face was covered in dust, her hair was a little messy, and her aura was unstable. Her energy waves were also unstable. Obviously, she had been injured. Pulling Ming Ming into his arms, Chi-yu said in a low voice. What happened? Weren't the Jili people completely suppressed by us? How could this be? Ryue and the other Zodiac guardian warriors also gathered around. Chi-yu had returned. They all felt a sense of relief. Ryue sighed and walked to Chi-yu's side, saying, "Let's go in and talk." Chi-yu and Snow Girl followed everyone back to the largest tent in the center. After Ryue's explanation, Chi-yu understood what had happened. As it turned out, when the Jili people's army had been reduced by half due to the combined efforts of the Human Alliance and the Zodiac army, a change suddenly occurred. Chi-yu returned to the Jili people's camp. When he realized that Chi-yu was not in the opposing camp, he immediately led the Jili people back to kill them. Chi-yu was indeed powerful. With the Pangu axe, even Yi-Ruo, Qing-Long, and the Black Tortoise could only barely hold him back. In terms of overall strength, the three of them were obviously stronger than Chi-yu. However, the Pangu axe was too frightening. Under Chi-yu's full power, he killed the Black Tortoise at the cost of some light injuries. Qing-Long was also injured in order to protect Yi-Ruo. If that was the case, the battle would at most be in a stalemate. After all, the Zodiac army could cause great damage to the enemy. However, after the first defeat, when Chi-yu led the army of the Jili tribe to attack for the second time, they were accompanied by hundreds of ferocious beasts. As this happened suddenly, the Human Alliance did not have time to react and suffered heavy losses. At this time, the most important thing was that the firearms and ammunition that Chi-yu and the others had brought from the modern era had been used up. This caused the Human Alliance's strength to decrease greatly. The Zodiac army alone could not withstand so many beasts. In desperation, in order to protect the four human races and the warriors of the Zodiac army, Ryue finally ordered everyone to use their tokens. The appearance of hundreds of golden-winged eagles immediately changed the situation of the battle. In the battle, they once again repelled the army led by Chi-yu. With the combined efforts of the Zodiac guardian gods, Chi-yu could not defeat them even though he had the Pangu axe. He could only injure them lightly. However, the battle had just begun. How could the appearance of hundreds of golden-winged eagles not attract the enemy's attention? The Rock Wisdom King had long known that his son and a large number of his clansmen had disappeared. However, he could not find the culprit. Once he received a report from his subordinates about the situation, he immediately led his men to attack. He swore to avenge his son. He had brought more than half of the golden-winged eagle's strength with him. He had become a great help to Chi-yu. Chi-yu's strength was similar to that of the Rock Wisdom King. However, the Rock Wisdom King's clansmen were obviously much stronger than the Jili people. In order to prevent the Rock Wisdom King from coveting his Pangu axe, Chi-yu had been keeping watch among the Jili people and did not attack again. Fortunately, this had prevented the Human Alliance from being completely annihilated. The 12 Zodiac guardian gods had led the Zodiac army to fight against the great Rock Wisdom King and his subordinates many times. However, their combined strength was not enough to fight against one of the great beast kings of the ancient beasts era. Under the valiant leadership of the Rock Wisdom King, they had defeated the Zodiac army several times. However, fortunately, they were wary of the orders of the Zodiac army's warriors. In addition, the 12 Zodiac guardian gods' warriors had fought to the death, so the Zodiac army had not been completely destroyed. However, as many as 2/3 of the Zodiac guardian gods had been seriously injured, just like what Chi-yu had seen. The Rock Wisdom King had only managed to escape with the protection of the golden-winged eagles. The Rock Wisdom King had already announced that if the Zodiac army did not release his clansmen and hand over his son, he would completely destroy the Zodiac army next time, regardless of the casualties of his clansmen. By the time Chi-yu arrived, it was the second day after the Rock Wisdom King had made his threat. There were only 2 days left until the time limit he had given them. After listening to Ryue's explanation, Chi-yu could not help but look gloomy. No wonder the Human Alliance had suffered such heavy losses. It was the Rock Wisdom King who had intervened. However, if the beasts were here, then where were the divine beasts? Why did they not send reinforcements? Chi Yu was very clear about the Rock Wisdom King's abilities. With the Rock Wisdom King leading his clansmen, Chi Yu was not confident that he could defeat the Rock Wisdom King. Therefore, what the humans needed the most now was a large amount of reinforcement. After understanding what had happened, Chi Yu instructed everyone to recuperate first. He also took out the ammunition that he had brought back and asked the uninjured members of the Zodiac army to send them to the 4 human races. As for himself, he went to look for Iruo. When Chi Yu saw Iruo, he could not help but be shocked. Before he left, Iruo was still so youthful and beautiful. She did not look like Kirin, who had lived for 1,000 years. However, when he saw Iruo again, Iruo's temples had turned white. It was as if she had suddenly aged more than 10 years. "Mother, I'm back." Chi Yu took a few steps forward. Originally, he wanted to blame the divine beasts for not sending reinforcements. However, when he saw Iruo, how could he bear to blame her? That's right. The black tortoise was dead. One of her 2 husbands was dead. How could she be in a good mood? When she saw Chi Yu, Iruo's eyes revealed a tinge of joy. She held his hand and said, "You're finally back. The past few days have been like a nightmare for the humans." Chi Yu said, "Mother, I already know what happened. You must be very sad about the death of the black tortoise. However, the dead are gone. We still have to fight against the Jili people and the beasts. You are the backbone of the humans. You must hold on." As he spoke, he channeled the energy of the source of nature into Iruo's body. With Chi Yu's support, Iruo looked much better. There was a tinge of deep sorrow in her eyes. "The black tortoise is dead. If not for me, he would not have died. Chi Yu's axe was originally aimed at me. However, in order to save me, the black tortoise used his strongest defensive power to block Chi Yu's axe. I still remember it clearly. I am already old, and his body was split into 2 by the Pangu axe. Chi Yu, promise me that you will take revenge for the black tortoise. I am already old. From now on, I can only rely on you." Looking at Iruo, Chi Yu could not bear to reject her. "Mother, I will. As long as there is a chance, I will definitely kill Chi Yu and take revenge for the black tortoise. Chi Yu is the enemy of the entire human race. I will not let him off. However, I am curious. Since the great Rock Wisdom King brought his people to attack us, why did the divine beasts not appear? If not for Ryue and the rest fighting with all their might, the human race would have been wiped out. Where is Senior Emohua now?" Iruo smiled bitterly and said, "Child, don't blame Emohua. When the great Rock Wisdom King reached here, I had already requested for help. However, the reply I received made me give up on this idea. I don't know why. The great Rock Wisdom King, the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King, and the Chaos King actually came to an agreement. The great Rock Wisdom King is helping Chi Yu to attack us, while the main force of the divine beasts is being attacked by the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King and the Chaos King. They can't even protect themselves, let alone help us. Now, we can only rely on our own strength to fight against the great Rock Wisdom King and Chi Yu. However, we don't know how long we can hold on like this. Ever since Chi Yu was injured, he has been waiting for an opportunity. I believe that the next time the great Rock Wisdom King launches an attack on us, he will definitely show up. Even if he doesn't use the Pangu axe, he will still be a huge threat to us. On our side, your Zodiac army has already lost more than half of its combat power. The weapons that you brought back then are also almost used up. All we can do now is probably wait for death." When he came out of Iruo's room, Chi Yu's heart was unusually heavy. He understood that Iruo was right. Even with him, they couldn't fight against the allied army of the Golden-Winged Eagle and Chi Yu. What could he do to resolve the crisis in front of him? Zagru once said that if he didn't want his era to be affected, then history couldn't be changed. The final victor here had to be the humans. However, things had already reached this stage. How could he let the humans win? He and the Zodiac army could retreat, but that would mean that the humans here would be destroyed. For a moment, Chi-Yu couldn't help but have a headache. He returned to his Zodiac army gloomily. Once he entered, Chi-Yu heard Hu Guang's angry voice. F***ck, that bunch of stupid birds almost killed my dick. F***ck, if I don't take revenge, I am not a human. F***ck, if we were in our era, I would directly use a few Patriot missiles to blow up those stupid birds. Hearing Hu Guang's words, Chi-Yu couldn't help but have a thought. In an instant, his gloominess disappeared. That's right. His greatest advantage wasn't the strength of the Zodiac army. It was the technology that he had that didn't belong to this world. Now that things had developed to this stage, in order not to change history, he had no choice but to take a gamble. At this thought, Chi-Yu shouted, "Hu Guang, come out for a moment." Hearing Chi-Yu's voice, Hu Guang and Ian walked out of their own tent. Their pitiful wooden tents looked like they could collapse at any time. "Boss, you're back. How is it? Will those divine beasts come? I think if they don't come, we should retreat. We have so many brothers here. We can't all be trapped here. We can still make it if we don't die." Chi-Yu looked at Hu Guang and said with a smile, "What, my underworld boss? If we retreat now, will you be able to swallow this anger?" Hu Guang stamped his feet hard, but it caused the wound on his leg to hurt. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and said, "What can I do even if I can't swallow it? I'm not as strong as them. F***ck, it hurts." Chi-Yu said, "Hu Guang, if we return to the modern world now, I'll give you only 1 day. Can you find weapons of mass destruction?" Hu Guang was stunned at first, then his small eyes lit up. He raised his thick glasses and said in surprise, "Boss, are you saying that we're going to use weapons of mass destruction here?" Chi-Yu's eyes flashed fiercely. "So many of our brothers are injured, and the human race is about to be wiped out by them. We have no choice but to use them. Didn't the great Rock Wisdom King give us 3 days to think about it? Well, let's give him a little surprise. Tell me quickly, can you find weapons of mass destruction in 1 day? At least one that can deal with those golden-winged eagles in the sky." Without waiting for Hu Guang to speak, Ian, who was at the side, said anxiously, "No problem, I'm going all out. For this, I want to see those stupid birds being blown up into the sky. Boss, do you have more? Weapons of mass destruction are strictly controlled by every country. However, we have a collection, and now is a good time to use it. It's made in Russia and belongs to the previous generations. Although its power can't be compared to today's high-tech products, it's definitely enough to deal with those stupid birds." Hearing Ian's words, Hu Guang couldn't help but be surprised. "You mean that?" Ian said coldly, "Yes, that's it. I don't believe it. F***ck. No matter how strong these stupid birds are, can they compare to a nuclear bomb?" Hearing Ian's words, Chi-Yu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Originally, he thought that Ian and Hu Guang would at most take out some small bombs. He didn't expect this guy to open his mouth and ask for a nuclear bomb. Although Chi-Yu hadn't seen the power of a nuclear bomb, but he had heard that even he wouldn't be able to escape unscathed in the face of a nuclear bomb. How many of them could survive on the side of the Jili people and the great Rock Wisdom King? These two fellows were truly worthy of being the godfathers of the military world. They actually had such a thing in their collection. Too strong. Frowning, Chi-Yu rejected Ian's suggestion in the end. "No. We can't use a nuclear bomb." Ian was startled and said, "Why? The power of a nuclear bomb is definitely strong enough. If we use one, all the problems will be solved. That beautiful mushroom cloud, just thinking about it makes me excited. I thought I wouldn't have the chance to use it, but now it seems like it's just right." Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "No, we definitely can't use a nuclear bomb. Let's not talk about its destructive power. Even continuous radiation was not something that humans could withstand. This is a human settlement. If a nuclear bomb explodes, who knows how much area will be affected by the radiation? Don't forget, the humans of this era can be said to be our ancestors. If our ancestors are affected by the radiation and become strange, then our era will definitely be affected as well. Don't tell me you want to become a monster? Hearing Chi Yu's words, Ian couldn't help but stick out his tongue and scratched his head. That's a big problem. Then what do you think we should do? Chi Yu said, don't you have any other weapons? Just a slightly stronger anti-air weapon will do. The Geely people aren't that scary. The ammunition I brought this time and the Zodiac army should be enough to deal with them. In 2 days, I am completely confident that everyone's body will recover. With the help of the 8-cloud level water thundercloud force and the source of nature, Chi Yu was indeed confident that he could do it. Hu Guang suddenly clapped his hands and said, forget it, I admit it. Although I'm a little reluctant to use it, I have no choice but to use it now. Ian said anxiously, Old Hu, that's something worth hundreds of millions of US dollars. We are going to sell it to the Middle East. Chi Yu was stunned and said, what is it? If the effect is good, I will pay for it later. Kirin Group is developing very well. I estimate that in a year or 2 at most, I will have enough money to give you guys. 100 million US dollars is not a problem. It wasn't that Chi Yu was being arrogant now, but with a rich father like Chi Tianlei, he naturally had more confidence than before. Facing the enemy now was no longer his problem, it was related to the entire human race. 100 million US dollars was still worth it. Hu Guang and Ian looked at each other, then Ian said, Boss, you are treating me like an outsider. Anyway, we secretly got this thing, you can just give us the cost price of 50 million. Chi Yu said, we don't have much time, hurry up and tell us, what is it? Hu Guang's expression became serious, it was rare for him to say, Boss, have you seen the movie Brave Adventure Island? Chi Yu nodded subconsciously and said, of course I have, that is an eternal classic. You are not going to say that the thing you are going to take out is the one in Brave Adventure Island. Hu Guang nodded and said, that's right, it is the VX gas missile. When he said this name, his expression was obviously a little ferocious. Chi Yu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It was as if the scene in the movie Brave Adventure Island appeared before his eyes again. The green crystals in the missile looked so beautiful, but they were absolutely fatal. The male lead in the movie once said that as long as there was more than a spoonful of liquid poison gas in the air, then all the living things in a street would be destroyed. Who would have thought that Hu Guang and the others even had such a thing? It was really too strong. Hu Guang, you have such a thing, aren't you afraid of the government interfering? Chi Yu asked. Hu Guang snorted and said, although chemical weapons are widely condemned by the law, which country has ever stopped researching and developing them? Boss, don't worry, in terms of confidentiality, our Sacred Flame sect has always been the best. Only Ian and I know about the existence of the poison gas missile. One day is enough for us to deploy it. The poison in chemical weapons can be divided into 6 main categories, among which the most overbearing is the nerve poison gas, which is a derivative of organophosphoric acid, and can be divided into G and V nerve poisons. G nerve poison is the nail alkyl fluorophosphonate or dialkyl aminocyanophosphonate type of poison. The main representatives were tabone, serene, and remin. Class V neurotoxins referred to dialkylaminoethyl methylthiophosphonate alkyl ester toxins. The main representative was called VX, which was the VX gas mentioned in the movie. The explanation in the movie is not exaggerated at all. Depending on the equipment, the liquid poison gas content in the missile is also different. We have a total of 4 VX gas missiles, and each of them contains 15 kilograms of liquid poison gas. Once it is ignited in the air, then the area it covers will definitely be terrifying. Moreover, this nerve poison gas has an advantage: it will completely ignite within an hour, and will not cause continuous space damage, so it seems to be the best time to use it now. I don't believe that those stupid birds can survive in front of the nerve poison. As expected of an arms dealer. With such a detailed introduction, Chi-Yu could not understand the components of the poison gas, but the power of this nerve poison gas missile was obvious. Although the golden-winged eagle was strong, in the face of such a strong poison gas, even he might not be able to handle it. At this moment, little Peng's voice suddenly sounded in Chi-Yu's mind. "Master, don't. Let go of my people." Chi-Yu was stunned. After all, little Peng was already his master, and its sorrowful voice caused Chi-Yu's emotions to fluctuate. With a flash of light, Chi-Yu released little Peng from his body, and said in a low voice, "Little Peng, you have to understand, it's not that I don't want to let go of your people, it's your people who don't want to let us go." Chapter 256. Little Peng said eagerly, "Master, if you agree, I can go look for my father now and ask him to lead our people to retreat. If that's the case, will you not have to deal with him?" Chi-Yu's heart skipped a beat. It would be best if he didn't have to use the gas missiles. As long as the great Peng Wisdom King agreed, he wouldn't have to worry about him going back on his word. After all, his son was still with him. As long as he didn't agree, little Peng wouldn't be able to regain his freedom. At this thought, Chi-Yu nodded and said, "You can go and persuade your father, but we can only let you go after the missiles are ready. Otherwise, if you tell him about the situation, he will immediately lead his people to attack us. How are we going to deal with that?" Looking at little Peng's pleading expression, Chi-Yu continued, "Dong Peng, since you are my servant, I will treat you as a friend. I promise you, as long as your father is willing to lead your people to retreat and no longer be enemies with humans, I will not use the missiles." Little Peng had no choice but to agree. Without further ado, after a brief discussion with Hu Guang, Chi-Yu immediately looked for Snow Girl and activated the Kunlun Mirror's space-time travel ability for the second time in a day. In order to ensure that Snow Girl had enough energy to activate the Kunlun Mirrors, Chi-Yu, Ryue, Hu Guang, and Ian all returned to the modern era. After leaving Hu Guang and Ian behind, Chi-Yu and the other two returned to the era of the ancient beast. This trip back and forth consumed nearly half of Chi-Yu's energy. However, he had to hurry back. After all, the threat here was too great. Chi-Yu had to help the Zodiac army recover from their serious injuries as soon as possible. A day passed by quickly. The special healing method produced by the Water Thundercloud Force with the help of nature energy was even more effective than Chi-Yu had imagined. In addition, the ancient beasts had sufficient nature energy to replenish their energy. Within a day, he had already healed at least 80% of the injuries of everyone. The entire Zodiac army had regained their combat ability. With the addition of ammunition, the strength of the human allied forces was restored. After that, Chi-Yu went back and forth between the modern era and the ancient behemoth era, bringing Hu Guang and Ian back. Returning with them were 10 of their trusted subordinates, who were responsible for operating the VX gas missiles. Right then, there was less than a day left until the 3-day deadline set by the Great Rock Wisdom King. Chi-Yu kept his promise and sent little Peng to persuade the Great Rock Wisdom King, while he quickly used this time to recover his Thundercloud force. Under the command of Hu Guang and Ian, 4 VX gas missiles that were not very large in size had been created. They could be directly controlled by a laptop. Within 20 seconds, they could effectively strike in any direction within 30 kilometers. In order to maximize the effectiveness of the missiles, this time, Hu Guang and the others even brought back a small military radar, which was used to accurately locate the bombs. With everything ready, Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel relieved. After all, technology was extremely important. With these poisonous gas missiles, the originally one-sided battle was likely to change. Little Peng's departure lasted nearly 2 hours before he returned to the human camp. His eyes were full of worry. Feeling the change in his aura, Chi-Yu knew that his persuasion had failed. "Did your father not agree?" Chi-Yu asked. Little Peng said, "You have captured more than 100 of our people. Father is already furious. He doesn't believe that you have anything that can kill our people. No matter how I persuaded him, he refused. Master, I beg you, let my people go." Chi Yu had already thought of the possible answer of Great Peng Wisdom King. Little Peng was different from Great Peng Wisdom King. After all, Little Peng had followed him back to the modern era. He had seen many things that were unimaginable to this era, so he would believe him. But Great Peng Wisdom King had always lived in the era of the ancient beast. It was impossible for him to know all this. It was normal for him to be confident in his own strength. Little Peng's pleading and Chi Yu's unwillingness to interfere too much with the development of the ancient beast's era made him make a decision. "Little Peng, go there again. When you see your father, tell him that when the battle starts tomorrow, let the people of the Jili tribe rush to the front. I will let him see the power of the VX gas missile, and then he will know whether I am scaring him or not. If he still decides to fight us to the end, then don't blame me for being merciless." Little Peng knew that this was Chi Yu's limit. He hurriedly expressed his gratitude and went to look for his father again. This time it was much smoother. When he returned, he brought the news that Great Peng Wisdom King had agreed to let the Jili people be the vanguard. The strength of the great golden-winged eagle clan was obviously above that of the Jili people, so he was not afraid that they would not agree. After a night's rest, all the Zodiac guardian god warriors had recovered to their best condition. Today's battle would determine the survival of the humans in the era of the ancient beast. Everyone was very nervous. 4 VX gas missiles were set up at the front of the camp. The warheads, which were less than 2 meters long, shone faintly under the sunlight. Now, the only thing that Chi Yu was worried about was whether the special constitution of the Jili people would be affected by the poisonous gas. If the effects of the VX gas missiles were not as good as expected, they would be in for a tough battle. At the last moment, he might have to summon the Bull Demon King again and use the second condition that he had agreed to. This was also Chi Yu's trump card. But no matter what, he would never give up on the humans here. The warriors of the 4 clans who could still fight were divided into 4 square formations. Under the command of their respective chiefs, they raised their crude weapons and waited quietly behind the Zodiac army. Meanwhile, the thousands of people who had replenished their ammunition were lying in the trenches that had been dug and loaded, waiting for the enemy to attack. With the ammunition, their confidence was greatly boosted. After all, with these weapons, they had defeated the Jili people's army several times in the past. Now, the battle had become a battle between technology and strength. As the sun gradually rose, bringing more warmth to Dali, the plains began to tremble. In the distance, a large number of Jili people were approaching in a scattered formation. A large number of Jili people in scattered formations advanced towards Gulai. At the very front were the 2 Nalis, and behind them was a row of Na-Tuns. Ever since humans had advanced weapons, the Jili people had come up with this strategy in order to minimize their losses. The defense of the Devourers was much stronger than that of the ordinary Jili people. With the Devourers blocking the way, even armor-piercing bullets would not be able to cause too much damage. The advance of the Jili people's army was not fast, but it was very steady. Imperceptibly, it brought great pressure to the allied human forces. Chi Yu, Snow Girl, Shang Bing, the Plant Soul, Jida, and the 12 Zodiac Guardian God Warriors stood at the front. The Azure Dragon had yet to recover from his serious injuries. Thus, he did not participate in this decisive battle. Chi Yu waved his hand, and Hu Guang said in a low voice, "Prepare the number 1 missile. The target is 20 meters above the center of the enemy's formation. Let the missiles explode in the air." At this point, Chi Yu did not care about the Jili people's army. He looked into the distance and looked at the sky. Indeed, not long after the Jili people's army appeared, the sky in the distance turned golden. Close to 200 golden-winged eagles floated in midair. Although they did not fly over, they caused Chi-Yu to feel an immense pressure. These golden-winged eagles were obviously the strongest in the entire golden-winged eagle family. Among them, there were many who were at the same level as Little Peng. At the very front of the golden-winged eagle's camp, a giant golden-winged eagle that was more than 30 meters long, almost comparable to an undying divine dragon, was quietly floating in the air. Unlike ordinary golden-winged eagles, the color of its feathers was darker, closer to the color of purple gold. Coupled with its huge body, it looked especially obvious in the air. Given the flying speed of the golden-winged eagles, if not for the fact that the VX gas missiles could track their targets, Chi-Yu did not have the confidence to fight against the golden-winged eagle family. One had to know that the golden-winged eagles were 1/3 of the entire beast world's strength. The Jili people's army was getting closer and closer. Chi-Yu calculated the distance between the two parties and the current wind speed. He was slightly excited as he nodded at Hu Guang. He would not be soft-hearted towards these Jili people who had harmed countless humans. Hu Guang suddenly waved his right hand towards the number 1 missile. The target had already been locked on. The crisp sound of the keyboard allowed the radar to completely lock on to the target. Following an ear-piercing explosion, the rocket launcher at the back of the missile ignited and shot out with a whoosh. Under the effect of the rocket launcher, the missile's speed instantly surpassed the speed of sound. It was a speed that not even the golden-winged eagles could match. It was obvious that this was the first time that Hu Guang's subordinate had used a chemical weapon of mass destruction. He was clearly a little nervous. When the missile quickly reached its destination, the speed at which he pressed the detonation button was slightly slower. Fortunately, this slight deviation did not affect the effect of the VX gas missile. The shrill sound of the missile attracted the attention of the Jili people. However, before Nali, who was at the very front, could intercept it, the missile had already reached the top of the Jili people's army. After all, it was simply too fast. Just as most of the Jili people who saw the missile raised their heads in shock, suddenly, there was a loud bang and the warhead exploded. 1 tablespoon of poisonous gas was enough to destroy the lives of an entire street. This missile contained a whole 15 kilograms of poisonous gas. The instant the missile exploded, the force of the explosion sent some of the Jili people's soldiers flying. However, the explosion was clearly not its method of attack. In the instant after the explosion, a thick green fog suddenly exploded and spread in all directions at an alarming speed. Nali, who was at the very front, was stunned. How could they, who were vicious people from ancient times, have ever seen VX gas? They watched as the green weapon exploded, but they still did not understand what was going on. The speed at which the VX gas spread could only be described as terrifying. In just a short while, the poisonous gas had already spread further and further. Moreover, it had also started to descend towards the ground. The Jili people felt a little uneasy. They waved their crude and clumsy weapons in an attempt to disperse the poisonous gas. However, it was gas. How could it possibly be broken apart? In contrast to the panic of the Jili people, Chi-Yu's side was also very nervous. If the VX gas was unable to display its power, they would immediately be attacked by the Jili people and the great golden-winged eagle legion. That would be a devastating blow. However, Chi-Yu was clearly worrying too much. During the era of the ancient beasts, due to the beauty of the natural environment, there were much fewer germs compared to Chi-Yu's era. The absence of germs meant that the resistance of the people of this era was very weak. Even with the bodies of the Jili people, they could only resist physical and energy attack. When the VX gas descended and enveloped the bodies of the Jili people, the entire Jili people's army was instantly thrown into chaos. The effect of the VX gas was very simple, but it was also very terrifying. It could paralyze a person's nerves and cause them to die in an extremely short amount of time. It did not fester like in the movies. The effect of the nerve gas was rapid and fatal. The green fog spread like smoke. Countless mournful howls could be heard from the Jili people's camp. Hu Guang, who was beside Qiyu, asked, "Boss, have you seen a dog that can jump more than 3 meters high?" Qiyu was stunned. "Why are you asking me this?" Hu Guang chuckled. "Because I've seen it before. I once sprayed a dog with a female pepper spray. At that time, the dog shrieked and jumped. That sound definitely didn't come from a dog. Furthermore, it actually jumped more than 3 meters high and gave me a fright. After recovering for half a month, the dog finally returned to normal. The pepper spray that I used contained a very small amount of nerve poison. It was a very small amount and couldn't be compared to the VX gas." Qiyu already understood what Hu Guang meant. At that moment, as if they heard Hu Guang's words, the people in the Jili people's camp started to jump from the ground. Although they were far away, Qiyu and the rest could see clearly from where they were. This showed how high the Jili people had jumped. Qiyu had the best eyesight. He could clearly see that after the Jili people jumped, they struggled with all their might, as if they were trying to break free from something. However, none of the tribesmen of the Jili tribe stood up after they landed on the ground. Like harvesting wheat, the Jili people's army spread out rapidly from the center. Their lives were swiftly reaped by the Grim Reaper. At that moment, Nali, who was commanding at the front, came to his senses and shouted something shrilly. The Jili people immediately started to flee in all directions. The green mist in the air was becoming fainter and fainter, which brought them unprecedented fear. However, in order to guard against the humans' firearms, the Jili people's formation was already very densely packed. It wasn't easy for them to escape. The speed at which the poison spread was much faster than the speed at which they could escape. Furthermore, as the poison spread, the fleeing Jili people would inevitably trample on each other. In an instant, the entire Jili people's camp was in chaos. Qiyu shouted to the gunmen of the 4 tribes, "Everyone, get ready. As soon as you see the Jili people step out of the area enveloped by the green mist, concentrate your firepower and shoot them down. Leave no one alive." At this point in time, the battle between the humans and the Jili people no longer had any suspense. The key to victory was actually that tiny grenade. Based on one's vision alone, at least a third of the Jili people had lost their lives to the VX gas in a short period of time. This number was still increasing rapidly. The great golden-winged eagle clan in the distance did not move. The great golden-winged eagle clan could clearly see everything that was happening below with his superb eyesight. At this moment, he finally understood why his son would rather follow that person's orders than lead his clansmen in an attack. He was very familiar with the strength of the Jili people. At this moment, the Jili people were actually unable to resist the green mist. His heart was filled with fear. He simply could not understand what the green mist was. After all, there was no chemistry in this era. He smiled. A faint light flashed in Qiyu's eyes. He placed his hands behind his back and said, "Zodiac team, get ready. Lock onto the scattered Jili people and carry out a purge. Pay attention. When you move, make sure that the Jili people have already left the area of effect of the VX gas before you attack. Also, pay attention to any changes in the direction of the wind. In recent battles, they had been completely suppressed by the other side. Every time they fought, they would retreat in defeat. The soldiers of the Zodiac army had long been suppressing their anger. Seeing the tyrannical Jili tribesmen completely defenseless in front of the VX gas bombs, and seeing their pathetic appearance, they felt that it was a great feeling to beat them when they were down. The 12 Zodiac Guardians led the 12 Zodiac teams and spread out at the same time, heading towards the fleeing Jili people. Qiyu muttered to himself, "Why? Are you still not willing to come out?" An incomparably furious voice rang out from afar, as if it had heard his voice. A huge figure soared into the sky, carrying with it a tremendous amount of energy and an incomparably powerful aura. It swept towards the VX gas in the air. Under the influence of the huge energy, a whirlwind immediately blew in the air. Qiyu's expression changed slightly. His body floated out like a bolt of lightning, and the green glow around him instantly intensified under the influence of the source of nature. A huge tornado appeared out of thin air around his body. The location of the explosion of the VX gas grenade was precisely calculated by Chi-Yu. It was still very far away from their camp. Hence, the poisonous gas was about to be blown away. He was not worried at all. As long as the gas was not blown towards the front, it would only harm the fleeing Jili people. Chi-Yu's anger had reached its peak. Originally, he had thought that today's battle would be extremely easy. With the cooperation of the Great Rock King and his tribesmen, as well as the Jili people's ground troops, they would definitely be able to kill all the humans. However, he never expected that. Just as he was waiting for the end of the battle, the situation had completely changed. The Golden Rock King did not move, but his army had already suffered a devastating blow. At this point, it was too late for him to do anything. Looking at the large number of twitching bodies on the ground, Chi-Yu could only increase his strength, hoping that he could blow the poisonous gas towards the human camp. Unfortunately, the distance was too far. Furthermore, although Chi-Yu was powerful, he was not proficient in using wind energy. How could it be better than Chi-Yu's wind thundercloud force? A white tornado suddenly blossomed. Chi-Yu did not engage in a full frontal confrontation with Chi-Yu, instead relying on the green tornado to block the front. Using the effect of the tornado, the VX poison gas was released to both sides. Although the speed at which the poison gas was released had increased under the effects of the two's energy, it had also enveloped a wider area in an instant. When he saw Chi-Yu appear, Chi-Yu had already used his spiritual energy to inform the Zodiac Guardian God warriors to immediately return to their team and not pursue them for the time being. He did not want his people to be attacked by the poisonous gas. The poisonous gas surged and spread in all directions. Chi-Yu no longer had the time to care about the effects of the poisonous gas. Chi-Yu was floating 1,000 meters away from him. Although he was not close, Chi-Yu could still clearly feel the intense killing intent from Chi-Yu's body. It was filled with a feeling of destruction. Evidently, this ancient demon was extremely furious. Chi-Yu was in a good mood. The originally one-sided battle had changed because of a small poisonous gas missile. With this experience, it would be very easy for him to help the humans fight against the Jili people in the future. Advanced technology. After all, this backward era could not be compared to it. Indeed, Chi-Yu was close to losing his mind at this moment. Looking at Chi-Yu in the sky opposite him, he did not need to think to know that the appearance of this person had caused such a huge change in the battle situation today. Chi-Yu did not know what the green fog was, but it was the green fog that disintegrated the main force of his entire Jili people army. Pangu's axe was huge in his hands. At this moment, Chi-Yu had already forgotten about the threat of the demon Ox King. The only thought in his mind was to tear this fellow in front of him into pieces. Chi-Yu did not have any intention of backing down in the face of Chi-Yu. His previous failure did not mean that he would fail again this time. No matter how strong Chi-Yu was, could he fight against his two divine weapons? With a long roar, Chi-Yu released a domineering aura from his body. Kirin's king's power was fully displayed, and a huge shadow of Kirin appeared behind Chi-Yu. Under the influence of the astronomical phenomenon, he immediately entered the second stage of Kirin's origin mutation. Perhaps it was due to the enhancement of the thundercloud force. The black scales on his body exuded a layer of dark golden luster. With a flash of golden light, the Xianyuan sword appeared in Chi-Yu's right hand. The return of Xuanyuan's soul undoubtedly allowed the Xianyuan sword's power to be maximized. Through Xuanyuan's soul, Chi-Yu could better control every change in the energy of the Xianyuan sword. Facing the Pangu axe once again, he was filled with confidence. Chi-Yu roared angrily. A distance of 1,000 meters was nothing to him. He raised the Pangu axe high up, and an extremely surging and domineering airflow swept towards Chi-Yu, who was 1,000 meters away. At the same time, his tall body also charged in Chi Yu's direction at a speed that was hard to discern with the naked eye. Chi Yu's calm face did not change because of Chi Yu's attack. He raised the Xianyuan sword from the bottom up, and the golden sword light condensed 3 meters in front of him like a tangible substance. An ear-piercing sound of friction rang out. The long-range attack of the Pangu axe was directly cut in half by the sharp edge of the Xianyuan sword. At this moment, Chi Yu's body also moved. The black Kirin wings on his back flapped, making his body rush towards Chi Yu like an arrow. There was no doubt that Chi Yu was very strong, but at this time, Chi Yu had also become stronger. After his own disdain for hard work and the appearance of opportunities, his current comprehensive strength was completely comparable to Chi Yu's. A soft ding rang out. Although the sound was crisp and clear at the start, it wasn't loud. However, by the time this ding rang out, the battle between Chi Yu and Chi Yu had already become the focus of all the creatures present. Regardless of whether it was the allied forces of the 4 tribes, the Jili people who had survived, or the great Rock Wisdom King and his subordinates who were watching the battle from afar, they were all stunned. All of them were attracted by this earth-shattering battle in front of them. The Pangu axe, in Chiyo's hands, fully displayed its earth-shattering violence. It was not fancy, nor was there any technique to speak of. Every strike of the axe carried a destructive energy. Chiyo was about to go crazy. He poured all his energy into the Pangu axe. Even if he had lost the battle against the humans today, he must destroy the human in front of him. It was him who had ruined his plans several times. If he didn't kill him, how could the demonic god keep his face? However, would Chi Yu be defeated so easily? Of course not. He didn't even dodge, nor did he use any technique. The Xianyuan sword opened up, and every strike was filled with surging golden light. The soul of the Xianyuan was incomparably proud. Facing the challenge of the Pangu axe for the first time, he perfectly cooperated with Chi Yu. His control over the Xianyuan sword and the energy that Chi Yu poured in were perfectly combined. Golden light burst out, and every time they collided, the sky and the earth would change color. With the point of battle as the center, no one could approach within a radius of several thousand square meters. The violent airflow was like a meat grinder, causing the ground to collapse and form a huge pit. Any living creature within the space between the 2 divine weapons was completely crushed by the violent airflow. Boom! After an unknown number of strikes, the Xianyuan sword and the Pangu axe stopped for the last time. The sword and the axe clashed. Chi Yu and Chi Yu simultaneously used their divine weapons to press against each other. They were so close that they could almost hear each other's breathing. Their eyes met. Chi Yu's gaze was cold and calm, while Chi Yu's gaze was incomparably violent. If looks could tear the opponent to pieces, then perhaps Chi Yu would have died countless times. A wisp of blood flowed down from the corner of Chi Yu's mouth. Although he wasn't at a disadvantage in terms of divine weapons, in terms of his own energy, even if he had improved, it was impossible for him to catch up to Chi Yu's level so quickly. Facing each other, the energy of the two had been raised to the limit. The huge energy constantly produced ear-piercing tearing sounds. With them as the center, the air within a radius of 10 meters was completely distorted and in the process of constantly breaking. Updated by Tao Taro. Chapter 257. Chi Yu replied coldly, "You're not a human to begin with. You're a demon. Every single one of you Jili people deserves to die. If you're not destroyed, it will be a disaster for the entire world. We're enemies, and you're still asking me why? However, I'm very curious as to how you could recover so quickly. It seems like I've underestimated you." Chi Yu looked at Chi Yu, and his eyes had already turned blood red. There was clearly a reason why he could recover so quickly, and the method of his recovery was because of the Na-mei that Chi Yu had seen and killed previously. Those Na-mei were refined by Chi Yu using some special methods using the Jili people. It was unknown how many of the strongest warriors of the Jili people were sacrificed to create a total of 20 Na-mei. However, before Chi-Yu could unleash their full potential, Chi-Yu had already killed 10 of them. To Chi-Yu, the death of the Na-mei could be said to be even more painful than the death of the Jili people's army. With the special ability of the Na-mei to transfer energy, he had escaped from the Bull Demon King's attack. At the same time, he had also sacrificed the lives of 4 Na-mei before he could transfer his injuries and recover so quickly. To him, every Na-mei was actually a puppet of his body, and they all carried a part of his demon soul. With a loud bang, Chi-Yu's body was sent flying, but the light on the Xianyuan sword became even more intense. Chi-Yu's body was still flying, but the golden light had already completely enveloped his body. Immediately after, as the golden sun, moon, and stars appeared, 3 pairs of wings of different colors appeared on Chi-Yu's back. At this moment, the crimson golden armor of lunisolar and stars had completed its transformation. The most powerful battle form of the Kirin King had appeared. Taking a deep breath, Chi-Yu calmed his turbulent blood flow. The water thundercloud force was deliberately separated from the solar-lunar star crimson golden armor by Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu was very strong, and he was even stronger with the Pangu axe. The overbearing energy of the Pangu axe was not something that the Xianyuan sword could completely filter. Similarly, the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword was not something that the Pangu axe could completely resist. There were already many fine wounds on Chiyo's body. Under Xuanyuan's sword, who could escape unscathed? However, one of them was an external injury. One was an internal injury. In comparison, Chi-Yu had suffered more. Chi-Yu's body disappeared. Suddenly, a huge golden ball of light appeared in the sky. The ball of light flickered, and even the great rock Wisdom King in the distant sky could feel its sharpness. A huge golden longsword broke out of the ball of light. Oneness of heaven and man, the first move of the Xianyuan 8 laws. Feeling the incomparably huge energy on the Xianyuan sword, Chi-Yu could not help but be shocked even though he was in a frenzy. After all, the Xianyuan sword that he was facing now was much stronger than the last time. They were both oneness of heaven and man. How could it be the same with the soul of Xianyuan and without the soul of Xianyuan? A faint light flickered. Chi-Yu held the huge long handle of the Pangu axe with both hands. With a roar, he used all the strength in his body to raise the axe high. Surging white light condensed on the body of the axe, and the axe god of the Pangu axe and Chi-Yu became one. Splitting the heavens and splitting the earth, with an incomparably surging airflow, met the oneness of heaven and man that had suddenly appeared. The golden Xianyuan sword and the white Pangu axe clashed. An ear-piercing sound caused countless deep cracks to appear on the collapsed ground below. The light faded at the same time. Chi-Yu and Chi-Yu turned to look at each other in different directions. The Xianyuan sword was constantly trembling and buzzing, and the broad surface of the Pangu axe was also in the same situation. The light on both of them had become much dimmer at the same time. Their all-out attack had consumed a lot of their energy. After using the solar lunisolar golden armor, Chi-Yu was still weaker than his opponent in terms of energy. However, the attack just now was mainly due to the effect of the 2 divine weapons. The return of the soul of Xianyuan had caused the quality of the Xianyuan sword to be slightly higher than that of the Pangu axe. As a result, the gap between Chi-Yu and Chi-Yu had narrowed a little. At this moment, although Chi-Yu's internal injuries were a little more serious, Chi-Yu was not feeling well either. The residual sharp energy of the Xianyuan sword was also affecting his meridians. Chi-Yu roared angrily. Holding the axe handle with both hands, he suddenly spun the axe with his body. Like a huge meat grinder, he spun in the air. However, what was surprising was that the rotation of the Pangu axe did not produce any energy fluctuations. Instead, the energy molecules in the air were rapidly absorbed by him. With Chiyo's body as the center and the Pangu axe as the sharp blade, the rotation was like a huge black hole, constantly absorbing everything around it. With every rotation, the energy fluctuations on Chiyo's body became a little more tyrannical. The huge energy fluctuations increased again and again. After the previous crazy collision, Chiyo's heart had calmed down a little. As the saying goes, where there's life, there's hope. For the bull demon king that Chiyu had released, his heart was still full of scruples. Once the bull demon king appeared, he would have no chance. Therefore, Chiyu decided to end the battle quickly. Relying on his superior strength to display his most powerful attack, he wanted to destroy Chiyu once and for all. When he escaped last time, he carefully thought about it and realized that the so-called Big Dipper of Chiyu was not the complete form at all. Otherwise, how could he escape unscathed? He also understood that in terms of overall energy, although the opponent had the Xianyuan sword, he was still far behind himself. The lack of energy also meant that this human opponent could not exert the more powerful power of the Xianyuan sword. In this case, he would use his energy advantage to urge his own stronger attack. At this time, what Chiyu was displaying was the fourth move of the 7 heavenly styles of Pangu Axe Kai Tao Taro QQ 649503528, Destruction of Heaven and Earth. That's right, that rotating energy was capable of destroying the heavens and exterminating the earth. Under the constant rotation, the air and energy absorbed from the surroundings were rapidly compressed. As Chiyu rotated faster and faster, his body had already formed a vortex. Once that explosive energy was displayed through the Pangu axe, the effect would indeed be to the extent of destroying the heavens and exterminating the earth. Even the Bull Demon King, in the face of such an attack by Chiyu, could not resist it head-on. After all, the Pangu axe was ranked 3rd among the divine weapons. Chiyu floated in the air and did not move, nor did he urge his own energy to display the Xianyuan 8 laws that he could use. His body was flashing with a faint reddish-golden light. He seemed to be waiting for Chiyu's attack, but the corner of Chiyu's mouth revealed a disdainful smile. Yes, what he hoped for the most now. He wanted to see Chiyu launch an all-out attack on him. The rotating Chiyu continued to condense energy and condense it into a white color, just like the Milky Way in the universe. The terrifying energy made the allied forces of the 4 human clans and the Rock Wisdom King on the other side order a quick retreat at the same time, so as to avoid being injured by the huge energy fluctuations that would be generated later. Finally, the white energy had reached a saturation level. Chiyu moved, and a huge vortex suddenly rose. The next moment, the entire space became silent. An incomparably huge white energy suddenly rose, and only Chiyu remained in the same place. The Pangu axe in his hand also disappeared. The huge energy in the air condensed into the shape of the Pangu axe. The huge blade of the axe, which was 10 meters long, looked so terrifying. The Pangu axe sat there and became the energy source of the entire attack. Chiyo's energy seemed to have been sucked out. He floated in the air, gasping for breath. However, his eyes were filled with a fierce light. He absolutely believed that in the face of such an attack, even Chiyu, who had the Xianyuan sword, would not be able to resist the power that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. It was true that the revolving star passage technique could change the direction of the opponent's attack. However, with the current strength of this human, how could the first half of the revolving star passage technique be able to change the direction of his attack? The whole world seemed to have turned white. At least, this was what the spectators thought, because the huge white axe blade had already swept towards Chiyu. At this moment, the air on both sides of Chiyu's body had been completely sucked out by the energy that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. The pressure on his body made it impossible for him to dodge. Under the influence of the Chi, it was impossible for him to dodge. That's right, Chiyu could not dodge. He also did not use the revolving star passage technique or the Xianyuan sword to attack. Just as the huge axe blade cut through the air, Chiyu suddenly waved his hand. His palm swept across his chest. Gold, green, blue, red, and yellow lights simultaneously lit up. the lights fused together, forming a multicolored light barrier. This soft light completely enveloped Chi-Yu's body. Although the area covered was very small, for Chi-Yu it was more than enough. A huge amount of energy came crashing down. When that incomparably tyrannical energy passed through the multicolored light barrier, the light around the barrier flickered. The 7 forms of split the heavens, the 4th form, heaven and extinguishing the earth, disappeared. But Chi-Yu was still floating in the air, as if nothing had happened. The multicolored light barrier around his body also disappeared. However, no one could see Chi-Yu's body now. After all, heaven and extinguishing the earth was an energy that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. When the white light suddenly bombarded the ground, an incomparably surging explosion resounded throughout the battlefield. The golden-winged eagle in the sky trembled. On the side of the human allied forces, almost everyone was shaken and fell to the ground. Even the Zodiac army only had 12 Zodiac guardian warriors standing. Under Chi-Yu's body, a huge, bottomless ravine appeared. Indeed, it was impossible to see how much damage Panga's axe had done to the ground. The Zodiac guardian warriors exclaimed at the same time. The 12 of them floated up and were about to pounce on Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu looked at the dust flying in front of him. Under the power of Panga's axe, the earth was almost destroyed by him. He could not help but laugh proudly. Humans were humans after all. Even if he had the Xianyuan sword, so what? Didn't he still die in front of his Panga's axe? Just when Chi-Yu was still complacent, he was suddenly horrified to see that a golden light had quietly drilled out of the smoke. Panga's axe had not yet returned to Chi-Yu's hand. Watching the golden light coming in front of him, Chi-Yu could only subconsciously raise his right arm and concentrate all the energy in his body on it. At the same time, he summoned a Mei to replace his body. A large cloud of blood exploded in the air. No matter how fast Chi-Yu's reaction was, he was still a beat too late. Although the Mei had replaced his body, it did not have time to replace his right arm. Like the Mei who had died for him, Chi-Yu's right arm had been twisted into powder by the incomparably sharp Xianyuan sword. Chi-Yu had condensed a large amount of energy in order to save his life, causing his blood to gush out from the wound. In just an instant, half of the blood in his body had disappeared. Fortunately, he had the body of a demon god. Otherwise, he would have been finished by this sword. Floating a kilometer away, Chi-Yu looked at Chi-Yu with a dumbfounded expression. "No, this is impossible. How can you be unscathed after the destruction of heaven and earth? This is simply impossible." That's right, Chi-Yu, who was floating in the air, was indeed unscathed. Looking at the pale Chi-Yu who had lost his right arm, Chi-Yu could not help but laugh. "I often like to say that in this world, nothing is impossible. You are my enemy, and I don't need to tell you why. Chi-Yu, die." While speaking, Chi-Yu raised his Xianyuan sword in a bluff. Chi-Yu used his left hand to retrieve the Panga's axe. However, in his current state, how could he fight with Chi-Yu again? Without hesitation, his body turned into a shadow, turned around, and fled. At this moment, a huge black shadow gushed out of Chi-Yu's body. The black shadow enlarged in the air, and a giant spirit palm suddenly grabbed in Chi-Yu's direction. That's right, the Bull Demon King had appeared. A strong suction force was emitted from the Bull Demon King's hand, but Chi-Yu, who was in front of him, had already disappeared. The Mei was crushed by the power of the Bull Demon King's hand, and Chi-Yu had disappeared without a trace. He disappeared without a trace. Chi-Yu was not a fool. He would always leave a way out for himself. Before the war began, he had set up a Mei in a secret place. It was impossible for him to teleport over a long distance, but he could use the demonic soul in the Mei to instantly swap his body with the Mei. It was also for this reason that he was able to save his life twice. The Bull Demon King's huge body floated in the air. He suddenly turned his head and roared at Chi-Yu. "Why? Why didn't you kill him? You had a chance just now." Chi-Yu looked coldly at the Bull Demon King and said, "Whether I kill him or not is my business. At least, before you complete 3 things for me, you have no right to ask me to do anything. If you want to kill him, why didn't you take the initiative just now? Wasn't it because you wanted to wait for me to be defeated by Chi Yu before asking for your help? Looking at the determined gaze in Chi Yu's eyes, the raging bull demon king gradually calmed down. As the saying goes, a little impatience spoils great plans. For the sake of his own future, the bull demon king forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and nodded at Chi Yu. Hello. One day, I will make you regret this. The black shadow shrank and returned to Chi Yu's body. The allied human forces were already cheering. Chi Yu raised the Xianyuan sword in his hand high up. The huge sword released thousands of golden rays in the air, which also represented the start of the humans' counterattack against the Jili people. A strong energy wave rose from the Zodiac army. Under the guidance of Chi Yu's spiritual energy, all the warriors of the Zodiac army released their mount. Hundreds of golden-winged eagles flew in all directions with the help of the 12 Zodiac guardian gods and their respective team members. The Jili people had already been defeated, and Chi Yu had escaped with serious injuries. In order to avoid further trouble, it was time to cleanse the Jili people. Only about 10,000 soldiers of the Jili people managed to escape from the V-gas missiles. They were the last main force of the Jili people. In order to return to the modern world and be at ease, Chi Yu had to reduce the strength of the Jili people as much as possible. At the same time, the allied human forces also moved under the command of Yi-Ruo. Although they couldn't fight the Jili people head-on, they wouldn't let the Jili people off. Led by the thousands of humans who possessed modern firearms, they quickly chased after the remnants of the Jili people. Chi Yu didn't give chase. Although there might be a few powerful Nali among the Jili people, with the 12 Zodiac guardian gods around, he didn't need to worry about the situation. Now, the biggest threat was the Great Rock King and his tribesmen who hadn't left the sky yet. Chi Yu floated up with the Xianyuan sword. With a few flashes, he arrived 100 meters away from the Great Rock King. When he felt the strong energy waves from the Great Rock King, Chi Yu knew that the Great Rock King, who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, was stronger than Chi Yu in terms of energy. Furthermore, the Great Rock King had his own golden-winged eagle army. If they really fought, his golden-winged eagles wouldn't be able to use their full strength. Even without the Jili people, it wouldn't be easy to defeat the Great Rock King's tribesmen. Fortunately, the VX poison gas missiles changed the situation. Even if the poison gas missiles were useless against a strong expert like the Great Rock King, it didn't mean that it was useless against his tribesmen. The area that the 3 VX poison gas missiles could cover, even with the speed of the golden-winged eagle, would be affected. Most of them would probably be infected as well. That was a loss that the Great Rock Wisdom King could not bear. The golden light faded and the Great Rock King's huge body quickly shrank. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a human. His resolute face looked a little gloomy. His son had been captured, so how could he be in a good mood? Unfortunately, this enemy was too strong. Looking at the Xianyuan sword in Chi Yu's hand, he really didn't know how to deal with it. Thinking back to the terrifying destructive power of the green mist against the Jili people, he really didn't have the courage to let his tribesmen face such a terrifying attack. Although he had thought of various ways to deal with the poison gas, he didn't have absolute confidence in it. He definitely wasn't willing to take the risk. After all, the world was divided among the beasts. He didn't want his strength to be weakened and be devoured by the other 2 fellows. Looking at the Great Rock King in front of him, a golden light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes. He released Little Peng from his body. He didn't have the slightest bit of fear facing so many powerful golden-winged eagles alone. Although the Great Rock King was stronger than him, in terms of overall strength, he might not be stronger than Chi Yu. After all, Chi Yu had Panga's axe. Even Chi Yu was killed by him. With the Great Rock King's deep foresight, it was impossible for him to go against him. When Little Peng came out, He looked at his father with a pleading look in his eyes. Previously, when the poison gas missiles were launched, Chi Yu specially used his spiritual energy to transmit everything outside to Little Peng. After all, Little Peng couldn't be compared to the Bull Demon King. Without Chi Yu's permission, he couldn't sense everything outside. The VX poison gas missiles left an extremely deep impression on him. Father, you see. Before Chi Yu could speak, Little Peng already said eagerly. The Great Rock King looked at his son and said to Chi Yu in a deep voice, "Release my son and my clansmen, and I can promise you that I will never launch any form of attack against humans in the future." Chi Yu indifferently replied, "Great Rock Wisdom King, are you trying to negotiate with me? Back then, when I didn't have the Xianyuan sword, I wasn't afraid of beasts like you, let alone now. Although the Bull Demon King didn't appear for long, I think you should have seen it. You should also be able to guess that the reason why the Bull Demon King is in my body is because, like your son, he has become my servant. Do you think that with your strength, you have the qualifications to negotiate with me?" He said this to clearly tell the Great Rock King that not only did he have the VX poison gas missiles, but he also had the help of a super expert like the Bull Demon King. If they really fought, the Great Rock Eagle clan would definitely not be able to get away with it. Chi Yu's tough attitude couldn't help but make the Great Rock King's eyebrows twitch. He was too familiar with the Bull Demon King's aura. It was absolutely impossible to fake it. This young man in golden armor in front of him indeed gave him a feeling that he couldn't resist. However, he also couldn't give up on his son and clansmen. "Then what will it take for you to release my clansmen? Even if we are not as strong as you, I don't believe that you alone can resist our entire clan. Even if it means offending the King of Beasts, I will fight with my life. At that time, I can at least reduce the number of humans here by more than half." Chi Yu looked at the Great Rock King, who was pretending to be fierce but was actually weak at heart. He knew that the Great Rock King had already compromised. He smiled lightly and said, "Great Rock King, I have no intention of being enemies with you. I think that the few of you should be very happy that the Bull Demon King has been accepted by me as an envoy. Finally, there is no one to restrict you. If you are not afraid of your entire clan being wiped out, you can do whatever you want." The Great Rock King was suddenly enraged. Just as he was about to explode, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. After all, he couldn't use the fate of his entire clan as a wager. Looking at the Great Rock King's changing expression, Chi Yu continued, "Great Rock King, the problem between us isn't that hard to solve. Perhaps Little Peng has already told you about our agreement. As long as you promise me here that no matter when, you beasts will not attack humans, I can also promise you that after 5 years, your son and clansmen will return to your side. Although Little Peng's freedom will be limited when he is with me, the benefits he will receive are equally great. Don't you want your son to have the ability to transform into a human at an earlier time?" 5 years. The Great Rock King looked at Chi Yu with a gloomy expression. "No, how can I let my clansmen be controlled by you humans?" A cold light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes. "If that's the case, then let's fight. Let's see how many of your clansmen can leave here alive today." While saying that, Chi Yu raised his right hand and used his spiritual force to transmit his voice back to his location. "Prepare the VX gas bomb. Listen to my command, attack all over the place." The Great Rock King's face changed again as he shouted, "Wait." Chi Yu looked at him. He knew that the Great Rock King was already afraid. 5 years is not a long time. For your golden-winged eagle with a long lifespan, it's just a fleeting moment. It's just a blink of an eye. Think about it carefully. I'll give you one last chance. Otherwise, once the battle starts, I can't control the poisonous gas, and the final result will still be the same. Even if you kill some humans, I think it's worth it to sacrifice some human lives in exchange for the lives of your clansmen." The great Rock King looked at the sharp Xianyuan sword in Qi Yu's hand and finally compromised. However, I can't guarantee that the berserk beasts won't attack the humans. You've captured so many of my clansmen. My status among the berserk beasts has already dropped, and I can't control others. Qi Yu lightly said, "Don't worry about the deep-sea abyssal dragon king. How many of his clansmen can reach the level of a deep-sea abyssal dragon? On land, he can't possibly be your golden-winged eagle's opponent. After all, the result has already been decided by their race. As for the Chaos King, tell him that if he dares to do anything to the humans, I don't mind killing him like how I dealt with Qi Yu. I'm afraid his energy won't be able to withstand the sharpness of my Xianyuan sword." As he spoke, a faint 5-colored light was released from Qi Yu's chest. With a flash of light, the Kongtong seal had already turned into a seal with a diameter of 10 centimeters and landed in Qi Yu's hand. 5 huge immortal dragons appeared behind Qi Yu out of thin air, causing his strength, which was originally a little weak against the golden-winged eagle, to suddenly increase greatly. In terms of momentum, he wasn't inferior to his opponent. Seeing the 5 immortal dragons behind Qi Yu, the great Rock King's expression couldn't help but change. "Do you know how I just killed Qi Yu? Because I don't only have one divine artifact. You can tell all the berserk beasts that if they want to fight against the Xianyuan sword and the Kongtong seal, they can come. The humans will no longer be afraid of you berserk beasts." Sensing the energy aura emitted by the Kongtong seal, the great Rock King knew that what Qi Yu said was true. Only a divine artifact could emit such strong energy waves. He let out a long sigh. "All right, I admit defeat. From now on, the golden-winged eagle race will no longer make things difficult for the humans. As for the deep-sea nether dragon king and the chaos king, I will persuade them. Whether they listen or not is up to them." Qi Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He was far from being as strong as he looked on the surface. After all, the battle with Qi Yu had already consumed a lot of his energy. Now, he was starting to feel the strain of supporting the solar-lunisolar star armor and 2 divine artifacts. Although the Kongtong seal was very good, having 2 divine artifacts at the same time had imperceptibly increased the energy requirement for him. Just now, he had used the immortal realm of the Kongtong seal to forcefully neutralize Qi Yu's attack. Although he did not suffer any destructive damage, maintaining the immortal realm for the first time had consumed a lot of energy. Otherwise, he would not have only destroyed one of Qi Yu's arms. If he had enough energy to activate the oneness of heaven and man at that time, Qi Yu would definitely have been destroyed. Of course, Qi Yu also had his own selfish motive. The main reason he had spared Qi Yu's life was that he did not want the Pangu axe to fall into the hands of the Bull Demon King. He did not know if the Pangu axe would disappear after Qi Yu's death. If it did not disappear and the Bull Demon King obtained it, then how could he fight against the Bull Demon King in the future? The great Rock Wisdom Monarch led his clansmen and left with their tails between their legs. This also announced that the humans had obtained the final victory. Floating in the air, Qi Yu had become the hero of humanity. Everyone's gazes were focused on him. After the final battle, the number of Jili people who managed to escape did not exceed 3,000. The Zodiac army had achieved great results and became the absolute main force in killing their opponent. Only a few thousand of the 50,000 Jili people were left. This was a huge blow to the Jili people. For at least the next 10 years, the Jili people would definitely not have enough strength to launch another attack on the humans. Qi Yu did not delay too much and prepared to return to the modern era. Although training during the era of the ancient beasts was the most ideal for the Zodiac army, the war was over now. The beasts would not harass the humans anymore. Without the baptism of war, the Zodiac army would not be of much use to the humans. From Qi Yu's point of view, he also wanted to go back. At least he could spend more time with his parents before the decisive battle with Yamu. Chi Yu did not have absolute confidence in defeating Yamu and her guardians of the 12 constellations. He also did not know what his fate would be in the end, but it was a battle that he had to fight. After bidding farewell to Iruo, Chi Yu ordered the Zodiac army to pack up and prepare to leave. At this time, he looked for Changjie. "Big brother Changjie, I'm really sorry. I still did not bring Miss Xiao Lu with me this time." Changjie looked at the tired Chi Yu and said, "It's all right. I know you have your own difficulties. Furthermore, you have so many things to settle. You also have to take care of the entire Zodiac army. It's already hard enough. When I return, I will explain everything to Xiao Lu." Chi Yu did not bring Xiao Lu with him this time. One reason was that time was too tight. He had forgotten about Xiao Lu when he reunited with his parent. The other reason was that he did not regret his decision when he arrived and saw the situation of the battle. After all, in such a dangerous battle environment, it was hard to guarantee Xiao Lu's safety. Chapter 258. Changjie said, "How's the situation with Kirin Group?" Chi Yu said, "It's on the right track. Our products are selling well." Changjie looked at Chi Yu with a trace of admiration in his eyes. "I have never imagined that I would be able to reap such rewards in this special era. Not only have I seen another era, but my strength has also improved greatly. After this period of war, everyone's potential has been fully unleashed. After all, if anyone doesn't work hard, they might be destroyed by the enemy." Chi Yu suddenly thought of something and quickly said, "I came back in a hurry and didn't have time to ask Ryue what level everyone is at now." Changjie said, "The situation is very good. Although almost everyone has been injured, our speed of improvement is very terrifying. Maybe it has something to do with the gradual digestion of the energy obtained from the frozen spring. Ryue has now completely entered the 8-cloud realm. Other than a few Hotian Zodiac warriors, the rest have also reached the 7-cloud realm. Ming Ming has also entered the 8-cloud realm. Even the weakest Guan Jing and Mo Dan are now on the verge of breaking through the 6-cloud realm. It won't be long before they reach it." Hearing Changjie's words, Chi Yu couldn't help but be overjoyed. The results of the entire Zodiac army in this training had far exceeded his expectations. Overall, they were above the 6-cloud realm. It could be said that the strength of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors had increased to the Great Success realm. Compared to the Constellation Guardians, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. Looking at the joy on Chi Yu's face, Changjie continued, "There's another good thing. Although it's built on the foundation of other people's deaths, it's indeed a good thing for us. In the beginning, Black Tortoise died under Panga's axe in order to save Iruo. He discovered that Guan Jing's little fatso actually has a portion of his bloodline and is a true Black Tortoise pig. Black Tortoise passed some of his abilities to Guan Jing, and although he hasn't reached 6 clouds yet, his defense is much stronger than before." Hearing Changjie's words, Chi Yu couldn't help but feel excited. If Guan Jing was a Black Tortoise pig, then the legendary Zodiac army of the 4 great guardian beasts would be complete. Ryue was a dragon warrior and naturally had the bloodline of the Azure Dragon, while Su Dong was a white tiger. As Ming Ming's strength increased, her phoenix characteristics became more and more obvious. It was not hard to imagine that when she reached 9 clouds, the 3rd stage of origin mutation would definitely be phoenix transformation. In other words, the vermilion bird. Now that Guan Jing had become a Black Tortoise pig, it seemed like the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors had great potential. However, for Chi Yu, he hoped that Ryue could reach 9 clouds as soon as possible. From Master Zagru, he knew that once the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors reached 9 clouds, they would reach their complete state. At that time, their own talent domain would appear. This was the same as the Kirin clan. Perhaps the Zodiac Guardian God Warrior's talent domain could not be compared to Kirin's. However, the ability of a talent domain could definitely change the entire battlefield. Chi-Yu was very much looking forward to the scene when all the Zodiac Guardian God warriors had their own talent domain. At that time, they would really be able to kill gods and demons in their way. After leaving Changji's place, Chi-Yu stored a large amount of natural fruits that Iruo had prepared for him into his Kongtong seal. After leaving this time, they wouldn't be returning for a short period of time. As long as there was no threat from the Juli people, the humans' ammunition would be enough to last for a long time. On the other hand, there were more things waiting for him to deal with in the modern world. After a night of rest and recuperation, Chi-Yu's strength had completely recovered. The space-time tunnel opened once again. This time, in order to conserve energy, Chi-Yu led the Zodiac Guardian God warriors to activate the Zodiac Protection Domain. Using the unique characteristics of the domain, they combined their energy and continuously injected it into the Snow Lady's body. This made the teleportation much easier than when they had arrived at the primordial beast era, and also made it much easier to protect the Zodiac army warriors. Yamu stood quietly at the entrance of Parthenon and looked out. The terrain here was very high, and she could almost see half of Athens. The date was getting closer and closer. On the 10th of January, Chi-Yu, why did you choose to duel with us on your birthday? Chi-Yu. Why was it that every time she thought of this name, her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe? Yamu seemed to have lost some weight. Although she was still as beautiful as before, she was no longer as perfect as before. This was because there was a deep sense of sorrow in her sacred aura. It was the sorrow that appeared because of Chi-Yu. She really didn't know how much longer she could hold on. Betraying Chi-Yu was a much bigger blow to her than she had imagined. In the depths of her heart, Chi-Yu's shadow appeared almost all the time. However, she also knew that the relationship between her and Chi-Yu would never be the same as before. Yamu regretted. She regretted that she chose to sacrifice Chi-Yu in order to improve her strength to face the future dangers. Perhaps Mephisto was right. She shouldn't have let him go that day. At the very least, her heart would be at peace if he died. When everything was over, she would follow him to the underworld. However, he was still alive now. Moreover, he was about to lead his Zodiac Guardian warriors to fight against her in the final battle between the East and the West. Regardless of the outcome, it was an outcome that she couldn't bear. When Zagru proposed to cooperate with Chi-Yu, but was firmly rejected by Chi-Yu, Yamu really felt very tired. Now, she wished that she was the one who was sent away by Mephisto. That way, she wouldn't have to suffer as much as she did now. Are you thinking of him again? A pleasant voice sounded behind Yamu. An identical face appeared beside her. Although it didn't have the sacred aura that Yamu had, as a twin sister, Yun looked exactly the same as Yamu. Sister, can you tell me what I should do? Yamu turned around and looked at her sister, who wanted to destroy her in order to obtain Athena's godly seat. For a moment, she couldn't help but sob. After all, they were related by blood. In front of her sister, she couldn't hide her sorrow. Yun sighed and said, I don't know. I really don't know. Based on my understanding of Chi-Yu's personality, he does like beautiful women. It's hard to resist the temptation of beautiful women. However, you've heard him too much this time. Actually, if you only heard him, there might be a chance to turn things around. However, Chi-Yu is a person who values friendship. Because of you, his friend and lover are all dead. A death grudge has been formed. As a constellation guardian, I should advise you to destroy him as soon as possible. Otherwise, Greece will have an enemy more terrifying than hell. However, as your sister, I don't know how to persuade you. In my heart, isn't his shadow deeply imprinted? When she first met Chi-Yu, Yamu still remembered that her first kiss was snatched away by him, and the two of them almost had sex. At that time, she was once lost, and under the influence of her body's lust, she thought of giving up the fight for Athena's godly seat. But in the end, nothing happened between her and Chi-Yu, and she broke free from her lust. But was the current outcome what she wanted to see? Chi-Yu hated Yamu, but how could he not hate her? If it weren't for him, that incident wouldn't have happened either. Yuyun felt the same pain in her heart. As the constellation guardian of Gemini constellation, her heart had two sides. Yamu took a deep breath and calmed her raging emotions. She looked towards the east. That day will come. No matter what, it can be considered a release for me. 10th of January. Chi-Yu, what should I give you for your birthday? As she thought about it, Yamu could not help but feel a little dazed. Yuyun looked in the same direction. These days, after returning to Parthenon, she thought about many things. She was surprised to find that she no longer had the thought of inheriting the godly seat of Athena. As the goddess Athena, her pain was far greater than her happiness. As she reflected on her past actions, not only did she not hate her own sister, she was instead filled with sympathy and pity for Yamu. Since she was young, she had grown up following the path of a normal person. But Yamu, behind the halo of glory, had endured who knows how many times more than her. Hidden in her heart, Yuyun already had an idea. Even though she wasn't sure if this would be able to resolve the grudge between the East and the West, nor did she know if she had the chance to do so, this was the only way she could think of to ease the tension between the East and the West. After several months of silence, the Dragon Field courtyard once again became lively. Chi-Yu had returned, Ryue had returned, the Zodiac Guardian Warriors and the 12 Zodiac teams had also returned. When they returned to the modern era, everyone felt as if they had been reborn. They said goodbye to the beautiful era of the ancient beasts, and at the same time, said goodbye to killing and war. When they returned to the modern era, which only had turbid air, everyone's faces were filled with joy. Chi-Yu's promise to them had come true. Their strength had more than doubled. Now, the 12 Zodiac team had even forgotten which family they belonged to. Every member of the team only had their captain in their hearts, and only their boss, Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu had brought them too many things. If it were not for Chi-Yu, who knew how many times they would have died. Chi-Yu's goal had been achieved. Now, which warrior in the Zodiac army did not submit to him wholeheartedly? Even if Chi-Yu wanted them to pay with their lives, no one would disobey his orders. They were finally back, but there were still many things waiting for Chi-Yu to deal with. Because there were too many people, it was impossible to rest in the villa. The 12 Zodiac team, who were full of energy when they left, now looked no different from primitive people. The clothes they had brought with them had long been destroyed during the training. Now that they had returned, everyone was wearing the clothes of the Alpine tribe. If people saw them outside, they would definitely think that they were from some tribe in Africa. His skin was tanned by the strong sunlight, and he looked no different from an African refugee. Chi-Yu asked Uncle Zhou to arrange for all the bathrooms in the villa to be opened, so that the members of the 12 Zodiac team could take turns to wash themselves. Then, he asked Uncle Zhou to bring some people to go shopping and buy a lot of clothes for the members of the 12 Zodiac team, according to their figures. Because there were many women in the 12 Zodiac team, Ryue also went shopping with Uncle Zhou in order to buy good clothes. It took Chi-Yu half a day to deal with the problem of clothes. Fortunately, the members of the 12 Zodiac team were already used to sleeping in the wild, so they were not in a hurry. Most of them were still immersed in the excitement of coming back alive. Although the Dragon Field courtyard was very big, it was not practical for more than 100 people to live in it. After consulting the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, Chi-Yu ordered the young people of the 4 families to return to their families. After all, they had been away for such a long time. It was time for them to go back and have a look. Of course, they were still members of the 12 Zodiac team, so they had to listen to Chi-Yu's orders at all times. Regarding this, none of the 120 members of the 12 Zodiac team had any objections. After arranging for the 12 Zodiac team to leave the Dragon Field courtyard, Chi-Yu could finally relax a little. Jida and Ming Ming first went home to see their parents, while the other Zodiac Guardian Warriors also left with Chi-Yu's arrangements. Everyone had their own families. They had been away for so long, so they had to tell their families that they were safe. Unlike the 12 Zodiac team, Chi-yu only gave the Zodiac Guardian warriors 1 week. After a week of reunion with their families, they had to return to the Dragon Field courtyard. After all, in less than a month, it would be the day of the duel with the Greek Guardian. Before the duel, Chi-yu hoped that everyone's strength could reach a higher level. After everyone left, the Dragon Field courtyard became quiet again. At this time, only 4 girls, Ryue, Shangbing, the Plant Soul, and Snow Girl, were left in the courtyard. This was Ryue's home, and the other 3 girls didn't have a home at all, so they didn't need to leave. Taking a deep breath, Ryue sat on the sofa in the hall and massaged Chi-yu's shoulders. It really wasn't easy. With more people, it became more troublesome to deal with all kinds of things. It felt more tiring than fighting with Chi-yu. Ryue, you don't need to massage, you should rest too. Thanks to you during the ancient giant beast era. Snow Girl went back to her room to sleep, and the Plant Soul did the same. At this time, other than Ryue and Chi-yu, there was only Shangbing in the hall. Shangbing sat opposite of Chi-yu. Seeing that he was concerned about Ryue, she couldn't help but say sourly, "Humph, you called me back, but these days, you haven't been with me for a single day." Ryue giggled and said, "Little sister Shangbing, could it be that he has accompanied me before?" Shangbing glared at Chi-yu and said, "That's different. How long have you been with him? He used to accompany you a lot." Although she was blaming Chi-yu, her eyes were filled with smiles. The coldness from when she was still the leopard girl had long since disappeared. During the ancient giant beast era, although there were constant battles and tempering, it was the happiest period of time for Shangbing. Because Ryue often had to command the overall situation, she was assigned to Ryue's team. She was with everyone every day, causing the coldness in Shangbing's heart to gradually melt. Especially when she was almost killed by Nali in a battle, it was Ryue who saved her in time. During this period of time, not only did she increase her strength, she had also completely integrated into the big family of the Zodiac Guardian God. Not only Shangbing, everyone felt the same way. Even the black tortoise pig, Guanjing, had become much more enthusiastic than before. At least, it could be seen from the time he returned to his hometown, Yangzhou, to see his parents before he even asked Chi-yu for his salary. "Ryue, Shangbing, when are you coming with me to see my parents?" The night before he returned, Chi-yu had already told his companions and lovers the good news that he had found his parents. Everyone was happy for him. If it wasn't for the duel with the Greek guardian god pressing down on his heart, Chi-yu could be said to be full of satisfaction. Ryue smiled and said, "I don't care. Anytime, it depends on Sister Shangbing. We will go whenever she says. When the time comes, bring Snow Girl along." Looking at Shangbing's strange expression, Chi-yu coughed awkwardly and explained, I promised the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King that I would take care of Schwerer, so this." Shangbing curled his lips and said, "Take care of her directly to the bed." "Chi-yu, I didn't know you were so abnormal. Although we are not real father and daughter, Schwerer has been your father for such a long time. Aren't you ashamed?" Chi-yu looked at Shangbing and couldn't help but blush. He couldn't say that Snow Girl had taken the initiative. Even if he said it, who would believe him? He knew that even if he jumped into the Yellow River, he wouldn't be able to clear his name. Ryue laughed. "It's all right, I'm already used to it. However, Chi-yu, shouldn't you tell me a number? How many more confidants do you have?" Sister Shangbing was anxious. "Didn't she just say that you didn't take care of her enough? You didn't take care of the bed." Don't." Shangbing pounced towards Ryue with a red face, directly grabbing her armpits. Ryue was ticklish, so the 2 girls couldn't help but play around in the hall, looking very happy. Speaking of confidants, Chi-yu couldn't help but have a headache. In the past, when he was still a little ruffian, he almost dreamed of having a large group of beauties. But now that he really had one, he felt that it was difficult to deal with. After all, every girl had a deep relationship with him, and no one could give up. However, now that he counted, It had already exceeded the 4 that Master Zagru had said. Even if it didn't develop, this problem was not easy to solve. He didn't want to mistreat any of them. Thinking of this, Chi-Yu couldn't help but think of what Chi Tianlei had said. He secretly decided that after the battle with the Greek guardian, as long as he could come back safely, he would definitely ask his father how to solve this problem of having so many wives. At this moment, Chi-Yu suddenly heard the sound of a car. He clearly felt that a car with a large displacement had driven into the Dragon Field courtyard. Who was it? Ryue and Xiangbing also felt it at the same time. The two girls stopped playing. Xiangbing returned to Chi-Yu's side and sat on his lap without hesitation, while Ryue walked to the door to have a look. Xiangbing's figure could be said to be the best among all the girls. After all, she was made according to the best female genes, especially her pair of elastic thighs, slightly better than Modi's. It felt very comfortable to hug her, and little Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel a little restless. However, this feeling quickly disappeared, because through his mental power, Chi-Yu already knew who was coming. Ryue's voice came from outside. "Who are you people? What are you doing in the Dragon Field courtyard?" Other than to Chi-Yu and his companions, Ryue was still a very cold girl. Her voice was enough to show who she was. "Ryue." Chi-Yu quickly jumped up from the sofa with Xiangbing in his arms. He called Ryue's name as he rushed out of the hall. As soon as he went out, he saw Chi Tianlei and his wife being stopped by Ryue at the door. Chi Tianlei and his wife weren't angry at being stopped by Ryue. Instead, they were very interested in the beauty in front of them. Compared to Snow Girl, Ryue was a bit more mature, but her appearance wasn't inferior. Moreover, her height was almost the same as Chi Tianlei's, and her delicate body looked especially slender. Coupled with the fact that she had been leading a group for a long time, Ryue looked a bit like a strong woman. If she changed from casual clothes to professional clothes, this feeling would definitely be more obvious. "Dad, Mom." Chi-Yu's call immediately made Ryue embarrassed. She quickly withdrew her hands that were blocking Chi Tianlei and his wife, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. Chi-Yu quickly walked in front of Chi Tianlei and his wife, and thought to himself, "Dad and Mom's news is really fast. Yes, it must be that girl Snow who informed them." Chi Tianlei couldn't help but be in a good mood when he saw his son come back so quickly. He teased, "Aren't you going to introduce us? You flirtatious boy." Chi-Yu scratched his head awkwardly, and quickly pulled Ryue into his arms to cover up the awkwardness between him and Ryue. He said, "This is Hai Ryue and this villa is Ryue's. I've been living here. She's my girlfriend. Ryue, these are my parents." At this time, Ryue didn't have the strength of a strong woman like before. She lowered her head and said with a blushing face, "Hello, Uncle, Auntie." Ryue just bowed to you. Ing Xiaodai leaned over to Chi Tianlei's ear and said something, which immediately made Ryue want to find a hole to hide in. She hated how her hearing was so good. Ing Xiaodai whispered in her husband's ear, "Well, our son still has good taste. This girl is good and her but is big and perky. She'll definitely give birth in the future." Since Ryue heard it, Chi-Yu naturally heard it too. He proudly pinched Ryue's perky butt. He teased in a low voice, "You have to be able to give birth." Ryue glared at him fiercely, but in order to leave a good impression on Chi Tianlei and his wife, she couldn't lose her temper. "Hello, Uncle, Auntie. My name is Lu Bing." Xiangbing held back his laughter and introduced himself generously. Then he added, "Auntie, whether he can give birth or not doesn't seem to have much to do with the size of his butt. It mainly depends on how hard Chi-Yu works." Ing Xiaodai finally understood. Her and her husband's private conversation had been heard by the 3 young people in front of her. She couldn't help but blush, but Xiangbing's candid personality also won her favor. Ing Xiaodai couldn't help but exonerate her son in her heart. No wonder her son had so many girlfriends. As expected, each was more outstanding than the other. Not to mention him, Even if she had to choose, she wouldn't know which one to give up. Chi Tianlei laughed and said, "Let's go. Let's talk inside. Chi Yu, you didn't inform us immediately that you came back. Fortunately, Shui Er still remembers us." Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Shui Er informing you is the same as me informing you. I just came back, and the courtyard has just quietened down." As he said that, he walked to his father's side and held Chi Tianlei's arm. Ryue and Shang Bing also cleverly stood on either side of Ing Xiaodai. The two old people couldn't stop smiling. They suddenly found their son and had so many daughters-in-law. How could they not be happy? As soon as the five of them returned to the main hall, the Snow Lady and the Plant Soul came down from upstairs. They had been through training during the era of the ancient beasts, and because they had been fighting enemies for a long time, their reactions were very sharp. They immediately reacted when there was a commotion outside. That was why they were able to rush over immediately. Chi Tianlei and his wife didn't think much of it when they saw Snow Girl. After all, they knew her. But when they saw the Plant Soul, they couldn't help but look at each other. There's more. After Snow Girl introduced them, the Plant Soul quickly came forward and bowed to Chi Tianlei and his wife. Ing Xiaodai glared at Chi Yu and said, "You brat! You have so many girlfriends, how can you face them?" Chi Yu was shocked and hurriedly explained, No, this is not her. This is my sister, a sister I recognize." Shang Bing looked at Chi Yu's embarrassed appearance in front of their parents and couldn't help but feel happy. She smiled and said, "Yes, she is a sister now, but I don't know in the future. How should I put it? Chi Yu has a daughter." Before she could finish, Chi Yu had already covered her mouth. It was better not to let his parents know about some things. Forcefully grabbing Shang Bing's round butt, Chi Yu transmitted his voice, "Shang Bing, just you wait, I'll teach you a lesson tonight." The Plant Soul sneaked a glance at Chi Yu and didn't object. She just shyly stood to the side. Her quiet appearance was different from the other three girls. The four girls were like spring orchids and autumn chrysanthemums, each with their own advantages. For a moment, even Chi Tianlei and his wife, who had seen many beauties before, felt a little dizzy. Ing Xiaodai reached into her pocket and muttered to herself, "Good thing I prepared a lot, otherwise this meeting gift wouldn't be enough." As she spoke, she took out a brocade box and smiled. "This is our first meeting, I can't even remember your names. But since you all like my yur, a meeting gift is necessary. Come, children, one for each of you." As she spoke, she had already opened the brocade box. The four girls couldn't help but look at the velvet lining of the box. They saw a ring of the same shape lying peacefully in the box. The design of the ring was very simple. It was just a platinum ring with a green gem inlaid on it. The other three girls might not know what it was, but Ryue recognized it. She couldn't help but exclaim, "An emerald gem. Auntie, this is too precious." There were 6 rings in the brocade box. What was rare was that the 6 gems were all the same size. The green light was very soft and didn't look very eye-catching. Ing Xiaodai handed the box to Chi Yu and said, "Why haven't you given it to your girlfriends? I can understand more and more why you is with so many girls. Let alone him, even if I had to choose, it would be very difficult. If you are all willing to be with you our Chi clan will definitely not treat you unfairly. You hurry up and give it to them." Looking at the brocade box in his hand, Chi Yu couldn't help but feel ashamed. He had been with these girls for a long time, especially Ryue and Ming Ming. However, he had only given Ryue a cold jade soul ring, and that was to atone for his sins. He really owed them too much. With a gentle light in his eyes, Chi Yu stood up and first pulled Ryue's hand. He put the middle emerald ring on the ring finger of her right hand. Ryue had always been reluctant to wear the cold jade soul ring, she had kept it as a treasure. At this time, the emerald ring on her slender, white hand complemented each other, appearing exceptionally moving. Even Chi Yu somewhat understood why most girls liked jewelry. Good jewelry could really make a girl more beautiful. The second one was Shang Bing. Chi-yu proceeded according to the order of acquaintance. The smile on Shang Bing's face disappeared. When Chi-yu put the emerald ring on her right hand's ring finger, her eyes couldn't help but turn slightly red. Looking at Chi-yu and his parents, the increasingly intense warmth of a family made her heart filled with emotions. The third one was Snow Girl. Snow Girl's gaze was very gentle as she looked at Chi-yu. She didn't care about the ring, but Chi-yu had put the ring on her same finger in front of everyone. This was equivalent to proving her identity and position in his heart. The last one was the plant soul. However, when he walked in front of her, Chi-yu hesitated. He had always treated the plant soul as his younger sister. Although they had a dubious relationship before, he really didn't want to increase the number of women in his life. Of course, it was undeniable that the plant soul, after growing up under the stimulation of the origin of nature's energy, also had a very strong attraction. However, even if this gift was given out, which finger should he wear it on? Chapter 259. Before Chi-yu could speak, Ing Shaodai had already stood up and walked to the plant soul's side. She looked at her kindly and said, "You silly child, what are you saying? Even Auntie's heart aches when I hear you. Don't worry, Auntie will treat everyone equally." As she spoke, she grabbed Chi-yu's hand and put the fourth ring on the plant soul's right ring finger. Chi-yu was stunned for a few seconds. He couldn't help but sweat in his heart. Wasn't this equivalent to his mother forcing him to chase after the plant soul's sister? Oh my God! What should I do? The plant soul's pretty little face was as red as an apple. Her watery eyes looked at Chi-yu as if tears were about to drip from them. Under the stimulation of the source of nature, the plant's soul not only grew physically, but after the time she spent with the ancient beasts, her heart was also completely different from before. Chi-yu's heroic performance during the ancient beasts, coupled with everything that happened when they were together, caused the little girl's attitude towards him to gradually change. Although she knew that Chi-yu already had many female friends, she still couldn't control her heart. As a woman, she would always be attracted to the most outstanding men. For a girl like her who grew up in battle, it was easier for her to be attracted to the strong. Without a doubt, Chi-yu was the strongest person she knew. Ryue, Shangbing, and Shuer all looked at the plant soul, making her feel uncomfortable. She couldn't care less about being rude anymore. She clutched the ring in her hand and ran back upstairs. He turned around and ran back upstairs. At the very least, he would never return the ring. Chi Tianlei smiled at his embarrassed son and said, Since you're back, shouldn't you report to the company tomorrow? Don't forget what you promised me before you left last time." Dad, I have a lot of things to deal with in the Kirin group." He really didn't want to have too much to do with the Golden Grain group. It didn't feel good to be the crown prince. Besides, he was used to freedom. Snow Girl chuckled and said, "Forget it. When have you ever cared about the group's affairs? I'm enough. Moreover, Sister Ryue was also here. You should go and accompany Uncle and Auntie. Golden Grain Group is different from a small company like ours. You can learn more management experience from it." Looking at his parents' earnest eyes, Chi-yu could not refuse, so he could only nod. Shangbing smiled and said, "I also have to go to work. I can't stay here. Snow Girl, can I go with you to the company tomorrow?" Snow Girl said excitedly, "Of course. Let's call Sister Plant Soul along. With her, Chi-yu won't have to control the shelf life of the company's fruits. Let's just make him a figurehead." Ryue nodded. He said, "Chi-yu, don't worry and go. In any case, it's before the 10th of the first month. We don't have anything else to do. Everyone needs to adjust, and I have to go back to work. Brother must be very tired these days. Let him relax a little during this time." In desperation, Chi-yu had no choice but to completely compromise. As for working at Golden Valley Group, for him, he was just idling away his days. This time, he had allowed all the Zodiac Guardian warriors to return home to recuperate so that everyone could relax after the intense training. This way, after a long period of training, they would be able to stabilize their strength and face the battle with the Greek guardian with a relaxed attitude. Xiaodai said, You've been living with Miss Ryue for a long time. You haven't officially married yet, so why don't you move back and live with us? Even if you get married in the future, you can't stay at a girl's place. Otherwise, people will laugh at me. Qiyu stared blankly for a moment. He had lived in Dragonfield Courtyard for a long time. Suddenly moving away, he was really not used to it. However, he really wanted to reunite with his parents. He said with some embarrassment, Dad, Mom, I think we should forget about it. I'm used to living here. Besides, we don't have that many things to do. Anyway, I'll be going to Golden Valley Group in the next few days. We can see each other every day. Xiaodai was about to say something, but was stopped by Qi Tianlei. Qi Tianlei said, Yu also doesn't want to be separated from them. Besides, since he's already used to living here, we don't want him to change. The last 2 times I came here, I saw that there was a large piece of empty land nearby. Why don't we buy it and build a villa next to Dragonfield Courtyard? In the future, our whole family will move here. Wouldn't it be convenient? When the time comes, they can live there if they want. Hearing her husband say this, Xiaodia's somewhat anxious expression eased. She nodded and said, All right, we can only do this for now. However, building a villa will take a lot of time. No matter what, it will take at least 3 months. Not to mention Qiyu, even Ryue couldn't help but sweat after hearing Xiaodia's words. Building a villa only took 3 months. Did Xiaodai think it was too long? Perhaps, only with their financial resources could they build a villa in such a short period of time. Qi Tianlei smiled and said, We've waited for so many years. Besides, it's not like we won't see each other. It's decided. What style of villa do you like? I'll find the world's top designers to design it. I'm sure you'll be satisfied. Although his father didn't show his emotions as often as his mother, but from his gentle gaze and words, Qiyu knew that his father and mother loved him the same. They both wanted to do their best to make it up to him. Although he didn't want to spend his parents' money at this time, he naturally couldn't refuse. He thought for a moment and said, I don't know much about architecture. A simple one will do. If possible, a small fountain would be best. I've loved water since I was young. Qi Tianlei's eyes revealed a trace of light. Water? No problem, then it's settled. Qi Tianlei and his wife stayed in the Dragonfield Courtyard to eat dinner before reluctantly leaving. Before leaving, Qi Tianlei simply told Qiyu to report to the Golden Valley Group the next day. Only then did he and his wife leave the Dragonfield Courtyard in the limited edition Phantom. Watching his parents leave, besides some reluctance, Qiyu couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Ever since he became the king of the Zodiac, it was the first time he was treated like a child. His parents seemed to be worried about him. Of course, he knew that this was Qi Tianlei and his wife's concern for him. It was really like being held in one's hands for fear of falling, and being held in one's mouth for fear of melting. The warmth of family made the hidden coldness and sadness in Qiyu's heart melt. The smile on his face gradually grew. The next morning, the 4 women got up at the same time to dress up for Qiyu. Ryue had already prepared a top-brand suit for him. Although it was under Qiyu's insistence. He was still wearing a black shirt inside, but an expensive suit was worn on his tall and burly body. It made the ordinary-looking Qiyu look a lot more handsome. Especially with his head of white hair, he had a strange attractiveness. The 4 women all went to work. Qiyu dawdled at home for a while before driving the BMW when Ting left for him to the Golden Valley Group. Originally, Ryue wanted to let him drive her Lamborghini. However, Qiyu was afraid that he would appear too arrogant when he just went to work, so he chose a relatively low-key BMW. After all, for a large group like Golden Valley, even if it was an ordinary employee driving a BMW, it was nothing new. Driving the car, Qiyu went directly to the group. He parked the car in the underground parking lot with ease and then went to the company's lobby. The last time he came here was on the weekend. Although he had attracted a lot of attention this time, he was not noticed by those busy employees. After the last terrorist attack, the entire group had been refurbished. It looked no different from before the last terrorist attack. As soon as Chi Yu entered the lobby, a man immediately came to greet him. Immediately, a man came up to him. It was the first secretary of the CEO's office that he had met last time. "Mr. Chi, you're here." Secretary Chen nodded respectfully to Chi Yu. Chi Yu smiled and returned the salute. "Sorry to trouble you. I just came here and don't know anything. Please give me more advice, Brother Chen." Secretary Chen stealthily glanced at Chi Yu a few times. He still clearly remembered what had happened last time. This young man was definitely not an ordinary person. From the first time he had seen Chi Yu, he already had this feeling. Especially after Chi Tianlei confirmed that this young man was his missing son, Secretary Chen only felt respect for Chi Yu in addition to envy. He brought Chi Yu to the elevator. While waiting for the elevator, Secretary Chen said to Chi Yu, "The president has arranged for you to work on the same floor as him. The president and the executive director are already here. They are waiting for you." The top floor of the Golden Valley building was completely made up of offices. Except for the president's office that Chi Yu had seen last time, the rest of the offices were for the members of the board of directors. It could be said that this was where the pinnacle of power of the Golden Valley Group gathered. Chi Tianlei and Ing Xiaodai arranged for Chi Yu to work on the top floor for two reasons. One was to confirm his identity, and the other was to get closer to their son. The elevator had arrived. Just as Chi Tianlei and Secretary Chen were about to get in the elevator, they suddenly heard a cold voice. "Wait a minute. Wait for the next elevator." Chi Yu turned around subconsciously and saw 7 or 8 men walking towards him. The elevator here went straight to the top floor, and it had always been used by the members of the board of directors. The leader was an old man who looked to be in his 50s. He looked ordinary, but his body exuded a gloomy aura that made Chi Yu uncomfortable. His black hair was obviously dyed. After all, the wrinkles on his face showed that he was not young. The rest of the people followed the old man like stars surrounding the moon. One look in Chi Yu could tell that they were his subordinate. The one who spoke just now was one of his subordinate. Secretary Chen's expression changed slightly, but he still said respectfully to the old man, "Hello, Vice Chairman." The old man did not even look at him. He just snorted and walked towards the elevator. Chi Yu's eyes flickered for a moment. He was not a kind person to begin with, and seeing these people's arrogance made him very unhappy. He subconsciously moved his feet and happened to block the elevator door, causing the old man to almost collide with his back. The old man obviously did not expect Chi Yu to block the way and could not help but be shocked. The subordinate who spoke before had already reached out to grab Chi Yu's shoulder and said coldly, "You are blocking the way." Chi Yu raised his head and turned around slightly. Relying on his height, he snorted in the direction of these people and said, "Secretary Chen, let's go. There is no need to lower yourself to the level of these uneducated people." Secretary Chen was stunned at first, but he could not help but feel happy in his heart. He had long known that Chi Yu was not an ordinary person. He thought, this is the perfect opportunity to take revenge. He hurriedly said, "Mr. Chi, this is Mr. Li Yao, the vice chairman of the board of directors of the group. Why don't we wait for another elevator and let them go up first?" There was nothing wrong with what he said, but his tone was very learned. It was the kind of slightly provocative tone that was obviously telling Chi Yu that this person's status was higher than his and he could not afford to offend him. With Chi Yu's ability, how could he not hear that Secretary Chen was dissatisfied with this so-called vice chairman? Although the Golden Grain Group was founded by his father, ever since he learned that the last terrorist attack was related to the people in the company, Chi Yu had a bad impression of the company's top management. He said lightly, They don't even understand the principle of first come, first served. How can such an uneducated person make way for me? Secretary Chen, let's go. As he spoke, he had already walked into the elevator. The old man, Li Yao, finally opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Who are you calling uneducated?" Chi Yu looked him in the eye and said calmly, "Whoever doesn't understand the principle of first come, first served is the one who is uneducated." On the side, Secretary Chen said, "Vice Chairman, this is the eldest son that the chairman has just found not long ago, Mr. Chi Yu." Li Yao's expression changed slightly. His eyes flickered as he looked at Chi Yu. He suddenly realized something and said, "So, you are the boy who came to see your father. You are not like your father. He has always been very polite." When Chi Yu heard his father mentioned, he could not help but frown. "That's right. My father is very polite, but I don't know how he educated a subordinate like you." "You!" Li Yao did not expect Chi Yu to be so rude to him. He said coldly, "You have to be clear. I am the vice chairman of the Golden Grain Group. At the same time, I am also a major shareholder of the group. Even if you are the chairman's son, you have no right to speak to me like this." Chi Yu smiled faintly. His smile gave off an unfathomable feeling. "That's just your wishful thinking. In my heart, there is no such thing as right or not. I have always been one to deal with the situation and not the person. I am sorry, Mr. Vice Chairman." When he said the last sentence, he deliberately emphasized the word vice. It was not that Chi Yu wanted to cause trouble, nor was it that he did not know how to respect the elderly. After Li Yao appeared, Chi Yu had scanned the bodies of these people with his spiritual power. He found that Li Yao's subordinates were all carrying guns. Moreover, the aura of these people gave him a very familiar feeling. It was very similar to the mercenaries who attacked the Golden Grain Group last time. What made him even more suspicious of Li Yao was that when Li Yao heard that he was Qi Tianlei's son, his heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and he even felt a sense of fear. This meant that not only did Li Yao know who he was, but he also knew what he had done. Why would Li Yao be afraid when he saw him? This could easily explain the problem. With a faint smile, the light in Chi Yu's eyes clearly became stronger. Although he had already guessed a lot, he would not act impulsively before confirming it. He pulled Secretary Chen into the elevator and directly pressed the close button. Li Yao's subordinates behind him wanted to attack, but they were stopped by Li Yao. Watching the elevator door close, the light in his eyes flickered a few times. No one knew what he was thinking about. As the elevator went up at high speed, Chi Yu asked Secretary Chen, "Brother Chen, what kind of person is this vice chairman?" Secretary Chen said, "The vice chairman joined the group about 5 years ago. He has his own company. It was only during the Asian financial crisis that he bought a large number of our group's shares. That is how he became the company's major shareholder. His shares account for more than 15% of the entire group. He is the largest shareholder under the vice chairman. Usually, he is in his own company. I don't know why he suddenly came today. This person has never been on good terms with the vice chairman. He once made a request to buy the vice chairman's shares, but was rejected by the vice chairman." Chi Yu slowly nodded his head. There were some things that he should ask his father for clarification. Soon, the two of them arrived at the top floor. Secretary Chen brought Chi Yu to an office next to the vice chairman's office. Although the office didn't look very big, Chi Yu knew that his father's office wasn't big either. Moreover, in this office that was about 30 meters square, all kinds of office facilities were available. A huge floor-to-ceiling balcony was more than 100 stories high. Half of the capital could be seen in the distance. The feeling of having an open field of vision was very comfortable. Secretary Chen went out to inform Qi Tianlei. Qi walked to his desk and sat down. The big leather chair was very comfortable. Although Qi Yu's body was very tall, he still felt like he was wrapped in the chair. He waved his hand and pulled a document from a bookcase to his front. He opened it and saw that it was empty. Chi-Yu couldn't help but smile. He thought to himself, Dad probably didn't really want me to do anything. I just want to keep them company. At this moment there was a knock on the door. Chi-Yu said, "Come in." The door opened and Chi Tianlei came in with a young girl. It seemed that Chi Tianlei, who was wearing a suit, had regained his usual majesty. Chi-Yu quickly stood up. His heart skipped a beat, and he didn't call him Dad. Vice Chairman. Chi Tianlei smiled and nodded to Chi-Yu. He said, "Let me introduce you. This is Miss Huang Wei, the secretary I arranged for you. She is very familiar with everything in the company. You can ask her if you don't understand anything in the future." At this time, Chi-Yu turned his eyes to the girl who entered the office with his father. When he saw this girl, he couldn't help but feel his eyes light up. It must be known that Chi-Yu had many female confidants. He had seen top beauties like Yumu, so a girl who could make his eyes light up was obviously not ordinary. Huang Wei's figure was very well proportioned. She was about 1.7 meters tall, and her short hair made her look energetic. Her big eyes were curiously looking at Chi-Yu. Her beige business suit outlined her slender curves. She blinked her big eyes and slightly bowed to Chi-Yu. "Hello, Deputy General Manager." Chi Tianlei looked at his son's gaze at Huang Wei and said with a smile, "All right, Huang Wei. Tell Chi-Yu about the general situation of the company and some of the matters he will be responsible for in the future. I'm going back to work. Chi-Yu, come have lunch with me. I've already booked a table in the restaurant downstairs." Chi-Yu quickly agreed. When he sent his father to the door, he heard Chi Tianlei say in a low voice, "That Li Yao you met is the one I suspect. It's just that I don't have any clear evidence at the moment. You have to be careful of this person in the future. Huang Wei is my niece. You already have so many girlfriends, so don't have any ideas about her. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to her father." Looking at Chi Tianlei's back as he left, Chi-Yu couldn't help but wryly smile inwardly. It seemed that even my father thinks that I'm a playboy. Is it really necessary to specially remind me? I'm afraid that I can only come here a few times a year. After returning to the office, Huang Wei went to Chi-Yu's desk and put the documents in front of Chi-Yu, saying, "Vice President, I'll give you a brief introduction of the current situation of the company." Immediately, she began to explain the current situation of the Golden Valley Group to Chi-Yu in a very professional manner. However, Chi-Yu had never learned how to run a business. Listening to Huang Wei talking about those complicated figures and looking at the forms in front of him, Chi-Yu couldn't help but feel drowsy. Huang Wei felt that Chi-Yu was a very peculiar young man the first time she saw him. Although he looked very similar to the chairman in terms of appearance, he was far from being as handsome as the chairman. However, this young man gave people a cold feeling, especially his striking white hair, which looked very unique. After more than an hour, Huang Wei finally finished explaining the general situation of the company. She then looked at Chi-Yu, who had been silent all this time. She asked, "Vice President, is there anything else you don't understand?" Chi-Yu woke up from her drowsiness and said, No. How about this for now? I'll look at the documents. You can go out and do your work." Looking at Chi-Yu's stunned look, Huang Wei resisted the urge to laugh. Although she was young, she was famous for being a talented woman. Chi-Yu's look was obviously telling her that she didn't understand anything. Huang Wei knew Chi-Yu's identity. This son that the chairman had just recognized seemed to be somewhat attractive, but it seemed that he was an idiot. Huang Wei pointed to a small desk next to her and said, "Vice President, I'm your full-time secretary. I'm responsible for arranging all your activities and work in the company. Where do you want me to go?" "Oh, I see." Chi-Yu nodded awkwardly and said, "Then you can do your work here." Huang Wei returned to her desk and secretly glanced at Chi-Yu, who was sitting there in a daze. She turned on the computer and began to do her routine work. She really didn't understand why the chairman, who had always been clear about public and private affairs, would let her idiot son be the vice president of the group. One had to know that this position was very important. Chi-yu sat in a comfortable chair. For a moment, she didn't know what she should do. She couldn't practice in front of Huang Wei. However, it wasn't a good thing to sit like this. She took the documents on the table and pretended to read them, but her heart had already flown away. Not long after, Chi-yu couldn't sit still anymore. At this time, he thought of a good idea. Since he couldn't go out and had to work here, he could call her himself. While thinking, he took out his phone and dialed Snow Girl's number. The phone was connected. "Chi-yu, how are you? Are you used to your first day at work?" Snow Girl's playful voice came from the other side of the phone. Chi-yu smiled bitterly and said, "Do you think I should be used to it? I'm a person who's used to freedom. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have agreed to them." Shui-er giggled and said, "You. Just bear with it. Our Kirin group will be managed by you sooner or later. Take advantage of this time to learn more. Alright, I still have to work on the third batch of products, so I won't talk to you anymore. Right now, our company's products are selling very well. When the second batch of products came on the market, they were all sold out in only 3 days. We had no choice but to bring forward the third batch of products. Now the company's accumulated capital has begun to grow rapidly. Sister Yu Guan said that she wants to hire more employees to expand the company's scale. If everything continues to go smoothly, we'll prepare to open up the international market. Alright then, you guys can do as you see fit. In any case, the group will be handed over to you. Alright, while you guys are earning, take out a portion of the money and gradually pay back the Arowana group." Snow Girl was silent for a moment before saying, "Chi-yu, Uncle Chien from the Longyu group has already paid back the debt for us. Uncle was afraid that you would be unhappy, so he told me not to tell you. However, I think you'll find out sooner or later. They meant well. You see." Chi-yu was stunned for a moment. Although he felt a little awkward, Chi Tianlei had already done this. If he refused again, what would Chi Tianlei think? He sighed inwardly and decided to let nature take its course. Since it's come to this, then so be it. After hanging up, Chi-yu was bored again. At this time, he couldn't help but think of the decisive battle that was about to begin on the 10th of January. "Yumu, oh Yumu, I've already obtained another divine artifact. It's hard to say who will emerge victorious in the battle between you and me. I'll definitely take revenge for Dingting. Just you wait." Huang Wei typed on the computer while peeking at Chi-yu. Chi-yu's phone call was very short. Other than knowing that he was talking to a girl, he couldn't hear anything else. However, Huang Wei's contempt for Chi-yu deepened. This CEO's son must be a playboy. He called his girlfriend as soon as he came to work. However, he was the son of the chairman of the board of directors of the Golden Valley Group. He could be considered a rich bachelor. Anyway, don't tease me. Otherwise, I'll definitely not be polite to him. Talented women naturally liked talented men. For a good-for-nothing like Chi-yu, Huang Wei would never be interested. After peeking, she devoted herself to work. Chi-yu was bored to death and sat for a while. He really couldn't sit still anymore. He couldn't help but ask Huang Wei, "Secretary Huang, I want to ask you, what do you think of the vice-chairman of the board of directors of the Golden Valley Group?" Huang Wei stopped what he was doing and raised his head to look at Chi-yu. "Vice-chairman Li, I'm a subordinate. I can't comment on the senior management of the group. I'm sorry, Vice-chairman." Chi-yu had no choice but to shake his head helplessly. At this moment, a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly filled his heart. Subconsciously, Chi-yu stood up from his seat and looked at the floor-to-ceiling glass behind him. He could clearly feel that he was being locked on by something. The next moment, with his amazing eyesight, he could clearly see that on the top floor of a tall building about 1,000 meters away, there was a person carrying a rocket on his shoulder and aiming at him. A dazzling tail flame lit up in the air. With a whoosh, it shot toward the direction of Chi-yu's office. In the blink of an eye, the rocket was already outside the window. The outer wall of the Golden Valley building was bulletproof, but bulletproof did not mean that it could defend against the bombardment of rockets. Another terrorist attack? It was too late for Chi-Yu to break through the window. Subconsciously, he flew up and directly rushed toward Huang Wei. Huang Wei had already noticed Chi-Yu the moment he had stood up. When he saw Chi-Yu pouncing at him, he immediately cried out in alarm and subconsciously took a pair of scissors from the table to block in front of him. His heart was filled with both shock and anger. This pervert actually wanted to molest me in broad daylight? Before Huang Wei could think of anything, Chi-Yu had already pounced on her. She clearly felt that the scissors in her hand seemed to have pierced into a steel plate. Then, her body was tightly held by a pair of strong arms. A strong force came, and Huang Wei's body directly flew out of her seat. However, when she fell to the ground, she did not feel any pain. What a joke! With Chi-Yu's strength, couldn't he release energy?